Hello, everybody, and welcome to the second episode of GLHF, or Garbage Lord Has Friends. Let me make sure I'm on the right page for my thing so I have everything. Today it was originally going to be, wait, subtitles were definitely reacting to me? Nice. Today was originally going to be with Cervantes Inferno. Unfortunately, he couldn't make it, but luckily, NastyTriangle was up for the occasion. And Morgie says, "Lurk, can't be active right now, but I'll be back once I'm done running errands." Fair enough, Morgie. Take care and good luck with all your feeding animals. But yeah, let's give a garbage welcome to our second guest, NastyTriangle. Go ahead, Nasty.
Oh, I'm here now? Okay, hi.
Excellent, excellent. So, just to give a brief history from what I remember of how we got to know each other in general, I believe we met in Sigrin's chat, Sigrin Maya. Is that correct?
I don't know. You tell me.
Give me a sec. I'm going to pin this real quick so people can ask things. Oh, never mind. I can't pin things because I hate everything. There we go. Until it's done stream. Yeah, that works.
To be honest, I don't know when I first met you.
Okay, so
But
that's
very
fair.
plausible.
I believe we first met just kind of chatting in Sigrin's chat. Is that... I guess if you don't remember, you don't remember. That's fine. Which I want to say was about... not last December, but December before that is when I raided into Sigrin's chat for the first time and started, chatting there, hanging out. But I think you and me were kind of like people who like to mess around and chat, and so we were kind of a duo, the Nasty Garbage duo.
Yeah, I mean, I came into Sigrin via Stubborn, and if you were in Sigrin, then I guess we met there.
Okay, sounds good. I mean, Sigrin and Stubbs are about this stream is basically the same thing always, right? Like they're the same person.
They are. It's
Yeah.
very true.
But today we will be interviewing... So what?
Sarcastically, yes.
Yeah, sarcastically, yes. I always call them Stubborn Maya whenever they do guest streams together. But yeah, we'll be playing the game We Were Here, which is an asymmetrical puzzle-solving game where basically one of us is on one side, we're in separate areas, and we have to give each other information to solve the different puzzles.
It should be great and awkward.
It'll be extremely great and awkward. Let's start.
Bonjour.
Bonjour. What's up, Gabs? Hope you're doing well today.
Bonjour.
Also, hello, Mad Hatter. I hope you're doing well as well. And Ilias, hello.
What's up, Ilias?
Crow.
Okay, I see footprints
Yeah.
and like snow. It's like snowing.
It is snowing, you're right.
There's a skip button. I'm not pressing it.
Yeah. Don't skip it. We gotta live in the moment.
It's an asymmetrical puzzle solver, you said, so I'm just
Yeah.
talking it out. There's like 4 people in the snow,
Uh-huh.
and we're panning to them.
Yep.
I'm gonna stop telling you.
No, please, continue.
Alright, we see 2 people, they're wearing goggles, and it's like they're like dressed for cold. One's reaching their hand out and it's got a midden, and then it's panning away and we can see footsteps going off into the distance. And then there's 2 people looking, and someone's like shooting a flare gun apparently, and it's going up in the sky. It's kind of reddish, and there's like a weird castle. Oh, and they're like approach the castle and they're looking at it, and I guess we want to see that it's tall and it's impressive, and maybe they're walking into it, or they're walking into it for sure. Yeah, there's an archway they're going through. It's good construction, and you could hear like the sound of their footsteps. It's amazing.
Also, thank you for the alert, Gabs. Good luck at work.
I'm glad you like my PNG tuber.
I hope you keep that as an option for one of your PNG tube redeems.
Well, I mean, I could.
I don't know, I think it's pretty great personally, but
It says we were here now.
Yes. Tile drop. One of my favorite things in a lot of games.
Hell yeah. We're playing a game. Oh, it looks like I might be able to control myself.
Yes.
Yeah.
So now we are in different areas.
Nice.
And basically, I am playing as the librarian while you're the explorer, so you'll encounter all different puzzles, and I will do my best to tell you information to solve the puzzles.
So am I supposed to do stuff?
Yes.
So I should be talking right now.
I mean, no, continue to talk, it's fine. At the end of the day, this is really just hanging out. Yeah.
Should I tell you about what's going on?
Yeah. Tell me what you see.
Okay, I'm in a hallway, and it like it bends. Or apparently, I'm actually in a kind of at a dead end of the hallway, and there's like 3 boxes stacked on the top of each other, and there's a barrel with 3 candles on it. And I think there's probably nothing significant about this whatsoever. So
Yeah.
maybe I should go into more detail.
Okay.
Yeah, so there's a column in the corner.
Okay.
And the column, the architectural style is where it's like thicker at the base, and then it gets a little bit thinner for a while, and then it gets thicker again. And there's an arch on the doorway.
What color is the pillar?
So, the pillar, it looks kind of like an off-white or a gray.
Like beige?
I wouldn't say beige, but I would say gray. Probably the lighting's making it look a little yellowish or reddish.
Okay.
But I don't think that's the case. But yeah, I would estimate that the hallways maybe like, I don't know, 15, maybe 10, 12 feet wide. There's a pillar on both sides of it, and there's like a small section that's maybe like 4 or 5 feet, and then there's a bigger pillar that has like the same sort of architectural style, but it's much larger.
Okay.
And so far I've described like about maybe 20 square feet.
All right. Cool. I have a quick question for you,
I
though.
should carry on.
Oh yeah, let me ask one question first, and then I'll let you get back to describing the architectural and scenery, painting a word picture, if you will. So, do you prefer to go by Nasty Triangle or NastyTriangle? Like, what's your preference between all the different ways?
If I'm gonna choose variants of my name, the name that I use online, I would probably just go with Nasty because it's simple.
Okay.
I mean verbally, but whatever. Okay, so I left that little alcove, and there's like, now we've got like a bigger area that has like, it's a large room that has like pillars in the middle of the same type of basic pillar style, same color too, so maybe it's not just the lighting. But on one wall there's like a bookcase that's been knocked over, and there's like a three books on the floor, and one of them is still resting on like one of the shelves, and it looks like there's a drawer that I can't actually manipulate. And next to that bookcase, there's 2 boxes, and on top of that, there's a candelabra with 3 candles, and there's words on the wall that says something around the lines of "The answer lies." It appears to be made in red paint or blood. Not quite sure. But there's 2 barrels to the left of that and another pillar, and I think I'm describing too much.
Is it the answer lies between the eyes? Maybe I have a book here that says between the eyes. Are there eyes that you can look between?
I mean, there are 2 pillars, I suppose. There's some books. I don't know if I can interact with them in any way.
I'll try hitting E next to them.
Seem like I can.
Okay.
Yeah, it looks like there's no interactability.
Okay. Do you see any colored eyes?
Carry on. No, I see no eyes whatsoever.
Okay. Yeah, keep looking.
I'm exploring a little bit more. On the left side of that room, there's a door that appears to be blocked by a gate that's spiked on the top that has like some weird diamond purple things on it. It's I don't know. It's graphically pretty cool. It's cute. It's a cute door. But I'm just gonna ignore that because it seems useless.
Okay.
I'm going back down the hall, and there's another dead end. And on the dead end, there appears to be like a walkie-talkie or something.
Yeah.
And now I could push to talk to you. So apparently, all of this talking so far has been completely irrelevant.
No, it's been very relevant. Now I have like a really good idea of like what you're seeing because you painted a very good word picture, very detailed.
So on this other alcove, we have another candelabra, but this one has 5 candles. It's got like 4 on like the cardinal directions, like north, south, east, west, and then there's one that's taller in the middle and it pops up. And to the right of that, there's 2 boxes stacked on top of each other. And left of that, there's like a table of some sort. It looks like it might have like a felt top, but it's not like a pool table. It's just like padded for some reason. And on the left side of that table, there's a box that I can't interact with. But underneath the table, there is what looks like a locked chest. And yeah, that's everything as far as I can tell.
That's a lot of information, and I will tell you the truth that I did not remember every single information you said, so we'll probably have to revisit some of that at some point. But here, I have a question for you.
I was basically rambling.
No, and I appreciate that. I appreciate how in depth you went for that.
Oh! Here's something important.
Okay.
I failed to notice.
Go on.
Opposite of the wall that says the answer lies. There is a just a normal wall, but it happens to have symbols on it.
Oh, what symbols? Can you describe it for me?
I'm not very good with describing, but here we go.
Oh, you've proven otherwise earlier, but fair.
Let's see. What is it? Is this Feta? I'm looking this up. No, that's the wrong. Okay, so there's one that has like a circle in the middle, and it has one line going from the top to the bottom, and then another line going diagonally both directions. So that's one of the symbols.
So like an X with an eye through it and a circle around the middle.
No. There's like a tiny circle, and then there's like 3 slashes that go through it.
Yeah.
One vertically down and 2 diagonal.
Yeah.
I wouldn't describe it the way you did.
Okay, fair. Understood.
Then there's like, to the left of that, there's a check mark that goes from the left down to the right and then back up. And then, just for fun, it's got a little tail that goes a little down also.
Okay.
So, and then down from there, there's like what I would say like a very low graphic flag. Like, you know, where it just has a pole and then it has like a little flag sticking out. But it's mirrored and they're touching tips.
They're touching tips.
Yeah, so it's kind of like an M. But
I see that.
The M's are triangles.
Kind of like a sideways 8.
Yeah. So, and then we've got an N, like a cursive N.
Like it looks like a slide.
The side is completely straight.
Yeah.
And yes, yeah, like that. We've got another one of those circles with. This one only has an X over it. It doesn't have 3 slashes, just 2.
Okay.
And then we have a letter M that's just like a printed letter M where the down part for the M is very shallow.
Yes. The left side, right?
It's just a shallow.
Yeah.
I don't know what you mean by that.
Okay.
So, and then we've got another check mark, but unlike the other check mark, it's got an additional swiggle down on the left and a swiggle up on the right.
Okay.
We've got the 0 with the X across it. We've got a letter A with a tiny T inside of it.
Yep.
At the bottom. And then we've got just like a pole with a mustache on top.
Okay, I was gonna say like sort of like a pitchfork / bident, but sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, what I'm getting from this is my question for you is, how did you get into streaming?
Okay. And also on the left side of the pillar, there's a green. There are eyes. I hadn't noticed that.
Perfect.
One is green.
Okay.
And the other one is red.
Okay.
I got into streaming because I was just like watching other people stream so much, and then I got like encouraged to stream probably by Stubborn Old Gal with the idea that, hey, maybe someone would hang out with me if I were to stream, and I could play like a game that people would actually hang out for. So
that's fair.
Yeah. I
like to hang out while you stream. Also, hello, Gear Glass 47. How's it going? And Andrea.
So I haven't interacted with any of the symbols, but
that's fine. You said what color were the eyes again?
There's a green one on the left and a red one on the right at the top of the pillars.
Gotcha.
Remember the pillows?
Yeah.
I can describe the pillars again if you want.
Well, first let me tell you this, and then you can go ahead and describe the pillars again. So green and red, green on the left side and red on the right side. It's going to be the little check mark with the squigglies, and then the 2 flags kissing.
Huh?
The check mark with the squigglies on both sides, like it's a tapered end.
Oh, okay. Fair enough. So I'll try to interact with those?
Yeah.
I'll try it.
And the flags touching tips, as you so eloquently put it.
I just got an achievement that says, I see you perfect play between the eyes. So that's cool. Oh, and it appears that the door that had a barrier, the barrier has disappeared and the door has opened.
Yep.
So, did you want to ask more about how I got into streaming, or?
Oh yeah, so you said you were inspired. Did you say by Stubborn specifically, or was it like by other people? Like, I know that you Also a fan of what? Flo McMasty? I can't say words.
I mean, I was a big into watching Stubborn Little Gal, and she was like, she really, really liked Hollow Knight, and then like the idea was that maybe I would stream Hollow Knight.
Oh yeah.
And she would like watch me.
You should stream Hollow Knight sometimes.
I streamed Hollow Knight like almost more than anything else.
I know.
To date.
How many hours total?
I would have to check my Twitch tracker, and it's probably not even correct.
Fair enough. Do you know...
But I'm checking right now.
Okay, yeah, on your Twitch tracker, you should also check to see when did you actually start streaming?
Oh, it doesn't know, because it doesn't actually note the time when I wasn't an affiliate.
Ah, fair.
Or whatever. It kind of hates people that are not affiliates.
Okay. I thought Twitch Statistics had that, though.
Maybe it does. Okay, yeah, I can go to my Twitch. For some reason, Twitch tracker isn't even loading for me.
Oh, that's unfortunate.
It's probably an internet problem. By the way, I keep hearing, like, grandfather clock noises.
That's probably just the voices in your head.
Yeah, I agree. So you check my analytics. I guess stream summary would know. No, that's horrible. That's horrible. Overview? Yeah, overview's better. Okay, it goes back further in time than I actually did stream. I'll figure it out.
Okay.
Soon.
So, you know, we don't need to know right now.
No, you definitely do.
Oh, okay. But while you're looking for that, let me ask you, well, because this is probably going to be there too, is what's the first game you ever streamed?
Looks like my first stream was December 4th.
Okay.
2022.
Oh, nice.
And if I recall correctly, I think the first game I ever streamed was Minesweeper. Like the original Windows.
Oh, wow. Would you say you're good at Minesweeper?
I did kind of because I thought it was ridiculous.
Yeah. You know, that's great. I think that's part of like how you kind of stream in general that attracts a lot of people to your channel is you do a lot of ridiculous stuff. And it's very well done.
I thought it would be strange if I streamed Minesweeper, and I also thought my computer could handle it because I was initially streaming on like just a laptop that I got refurbished for business purposes. So, yeah.
Fair enough. So Minesweeper, that's interesting. How long did you stream that for? Was it just like kind of the first time, or did you kind of stream it a couple times?
I believe it was just one stream. But
Fair
I
enough.
did play Tetris Sweeper once for
you did.
hours.
I also remember that, which would never be able to do.
Okay, so should we go to the
yeah, go to the next room
again? Okay, so I've come to the conclusion that the lighting is probably irrelevant. So I'm not going to describe the lighting beyond saying that the room is scattered along the edges with a whole bunch of candles. So there's a grandfather clock that appears to not have a face.
Okay.
It's making a whole bunch of noise even though I can't see anything moving, which is disturbing, I guess. It's like haunted, I guess. On the ground, there appears to be a rug that has like a mosaic pattern. Looks like there might be a pentagram and a whole bunch of like stuff, and it's torn on one side, but I don't know if that matters. There's a little stairs up and more stairs up, and there's like a portrait on the wall of what looks like a pelican.
Okay.
Only the pelican's body has been replaced by like a small, like a snail shell.
Okay.
And the beak has been, the head/beak is actually just a skull.
Okay.
Which is quite peculiar. But that's how I would describe it for now. So
skull, snail shell, and like long bird legs.
Yeah, they've got long bird legs, webbed feet. Then it goes up, and there's like a tiny body with a snail shell on top of it.
Does it have a tail?
Feathers sticking out to the left.
Gotcha.
Then it's got the neck going up to the top, and it's wearing like a skull mask.
Okay, cool. I had that picture in front of me.
There's a wall with a whole bunch of symbols.
Hey, cool. I can describe 3 symbols to you for you to press.
Okay, that sounds great.
So the first symbol is like a turtle with like a T sticking out of its butt. Like an upside down T.
I think I see that.
Yep.
I think I see that, yeah. That's a good description.
And then the next one is like a stick figure cat. Like it's like, yo, with like its arms outstretched.
Oh, like it has no feet.
No feet, just the upper half has the arms outstretched.
So it's like a stick figure flower cat.
Yes, a flower is also a good way to describe it.
Surprisingly, I've picked up a tile instead of like pushing it.
Oh.
Oh! I am seeing underneath the painting. There's slots for that, so I'm just gonna move it.
Yeah.
Over to the first slot, and then I'll go pick up the flower cat.
Yeah.
And I'll put it in the second slot.
Sounds great.
Okay.
And then the last one.
I accidentally picked it up again.
Okay.
Okay.
And the last one is going to be basically it's like a T with a triangle upside down on top, and the triangle is kind of like has two lines sticking out of the bottom part of it. You know, I guess it could be a scarecrow, but yeah. Okay. And while you're getting those,
wow, what the crap?
What did not work?
No. Apparently, I grabbed it and I threw it on the floor and it disappeared.
Oh, that's unfortunate.
An accident, though.
That is unfortunate.
It just went back on the wall, so I guess I let go too early or something.
Nice. Also, hello, Jelly. How's it going?
Oh, we got an achievement apparently.
Nice. What's the achievement called?
Expert play in the painting room. Mythbusters or something.
Mythbusters. Nice.
So I guess this clock was a red herring. Makes sense. It doesn't work. All right.
It just wants to waste your time.
Okay, I'm gonna try not to describe all sorts of things that I think are probably not relevant based upon what I've seen.
That's fair.
In this game now. Okay, so what's unique in this room is that we have red pipes. At least that's what I'm seeing so far. Hold on. There's also a door again that okay, that's interesting. There's a door that has a little sign on top of it that says orange, and there's water that is rising in the room.
Oh, good. Are you like drowning?
Not at this point, but
I should probably take care of this real quick.
Perhaps I will.
Okay, I'll look around and you'll tell me how things go. Real quick, Jelly
sounds a little menacing.
You'll probably be fine. I don't see it, so I'm not really worried.
Yeah, no worries.
There's any colors you see?
There's like lanterns on the wall. What the heck?
I'm turning valves.
Okay, I just got an achievement that said perfect play and
perfect.
Escaped.
Awesome.
But I don't. Oh yeah, the water's gone back down and the door's open. So
cool. I solved the puzzle.
You solved the puzzle.
I spun 3 wheels at random. Let's go. Also, in chat, Jelly says, "Garbage, did you know that you won Sky Season Best?" I did not know that. That's cool. I guess I should play Sky again. Is that Neshi's stream or is that somewhere else?
Okay, so I went. Should I keep talking or should I wait for you to finish with chat?
Well, before that, I have another thing to ask you.
Okay.
What is the strongest quality / trait for a streamer to have, in your opinion?
For the streamer to have?
For a streamer to have, yeah.
I think the most important thing is chat engagement.
Okay, yeah, I fully agree.
Like, I mean, I don't really care what you do as long as you're not ignoring your chat.
Yeah. And I think you do it really well, especially since you have yours set to be like auto, what's the word, like text-to-speech, so you'll always hear them.
I just do that so that I won't ignore them for sure.
I think that's, great, because it shows the people
not
there.
That I would.
No, I know, but I think it's like an added effect of like, it shows the people who are in your chat that, you're, what's the word?
They're part of the stream.
Yeah, they're part of the stream. And you have so many interactables with your redeems, which is great.
Cool.
But also, going to my chat real quick, so I have chat engagement. At least quoted us for, "Are you drowning?" You're like, no, not at this point. And then Jelly, Neshi posted a list. Nice. I'll have to check it out. I have his stream still up in like my background, but obviously I'm not watching at the moment. But
to be clear, I was not in danger yet. But if the water continued to raise, I might have been.
Yeah, and Ilya says, true, Nasty's channel is very interactive. Oh yeah, 100%. So Nasty, do you know how to swim?
Yes.
Okay. Are you a fan of swimming at all?
Actually, I don't enjoy swimming. I find it to be a very boring activity in general. I used to swim quite a bit when I was like a youngin'.
Okay.
My family owned a swimming pool instead of owning air conditioning. So we would use it regularly in the summer.
Makes sense.
And there was actually a period of time, about a year or so, where I was a professional lifeguard. So, at the YMCA, and, you know.
Oh, nice. You were a professional lifeguard. I was actually also a lifeguard at one point in my life.
Excellent. Excellent.
It was at the beach.
It was one of the worst lifeguarding positions I've ever had.
Really?
By that I mean I did occasionally do some lifeguarding at other pools. But the one that we had, it was kind of like hey, you're the only lifeguard. There's no rotations. No one will give you a break unless you manage to like see some other person who happens to be a lifeguard there to have them like fill in for you for 2 minutes while you go use the bathroom.
Gotcha.
So I would contrast that to like if you work somewhere that actually has like a bunch of stations. Usually you have like maybe you'll rotate every 20 minutes and probably have like a 5-minute break every hour or something.
Yeah, I think the way we had it was we would have people who were on like relief watch type of thing, where they would kind of go to the different stations and be like, "Hey, I got you for like 15 minutes. Go do your own thing," which is nice.
I worked at the outdoor pool one time, and one of the stations was literally just hanging out in the office, making sure people paid to come in.
Gotcha.
But you would often have literally nothing to do, which was like incredible. It was just like, wow, this is so cushy. And the most ridiculous thing to me is that it paid slightly better.
I mean, it's like management in a way.
Yeah, I guess so.
And then Ilias says, meanwhile, me and Andrea are out here drowning multiple times. And Andrea says, literally was just about to comment this.
I used to habitually scan pools whenever I was near one.
Oh, yeah?
As if I were guarding them.
I mean, it sticks with you. That's not a bad thing.
Yeah, exactly.
But anyways, where are you now?
Okay, I am in a tiny room with a staircase heading down. There is a big gate with with white stones on the top and on the bottom, kind of in the middle section. And to the right of it, there's this lever with a white stone on it that I have failed to touch. But I'm going to try to activate it now and see if something happens.
Go for it.
Oh, and it appears that the gate has risen up. But there's a gate further down that looks the same that has lowered. So if I progress further in the hallway, I'm now blocked by another gate. But there is some writing on the wall across that I can kind of see. I think it says something like, bring down the glading eye, or something like that. Bring down the glading eye. I don't know what it says.
What color is the gate that's in your way again?
It's got white stones. White stones. Okay.
And there's a switch that you have that opens and closes it?
There's two gates.
Yeah. Does this alternate it?
Yeah, if I flip the lever, it lowers the one. I mean, it raises the one closer to me and lowers the one further away.
Okay. Is the lever...
I can't progress.
So you can or can't?
I cannot progress.
Okay.
Unless I can do the lever from the other side. Maybe I can.
Try it.
Try that. Oh, yeah, we gaming now.
Oh, we're gaming.
That did work.
Cool.
It's okay. The thing that I can't read, it says bring down the guiding light. Bring down the guiding light. Okay.
I think I know what that is. Gaming.
Gaming.
I keep forgetting that Scoobs. I feel bad about it. Gaming. So I think I know where you are. I have a map in front of me. Well,
I've got quite a bit of places I can go now.
Yeah, there's immediate left and right, correct?
Yes, correct. Absolutely correct.
If you go to the right and take a right, there should be something in like a room that's might be a switch for a blue switch of some kind. Blue switch.
There is a blue switch. I found it. Yes.
Okay. So yeah, there's going to be 2 gates we can go to. I guess go ahead and flip it for now, and we'll see if it's the right way.
All right, I'm flipping the blue switch, and I heard noises.
All right, and
I
then
don't know what it did.
Yeah, we'll find out. Actually, yeah, just go straight out of the room, and then instead of like, you know, how you took the right of the room, just go straight, and then you'll get to the end of the hallway, take a left, and then another left, and then a right.
Oh, okay, wait. Did you want me to go right from the room I went right into, or left from the
Yeah,
room?
leaving from the room, go right.
Okay, doing it.
And then take a left.
Alright, I'm heading left.
And then take another
I'm not
left.
describing anything.
And then take a right. And there should be a gate, or it might be open or closed, I can't tell.
There is a closed gate with blue stones on it.
Perfect. Okay, that's the one that you just closed, but because you closed that one, we opened up another one. I just wanted you to check this real quick. So now I want you to go the opposite direction and go back to where the white gate was that you headed out first.
Okay.
Don't go into it.
Can you run?
I don't know.
I don't know.
You can try.
I tried. If you can, I don't know. I'm going to the white gates. Okay, remember the white gates.
Okay. Now, I want you to continue down that path, and then there should be like an open room, but just take a right from there. Oh,
all right.
1 second. I need to hit the switch again on my side.
There's like a... It looked like there was some sort of slimy thing that went off to the right, so that's interesting.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, so you're going to take that right turn, go to the end of that hallway, take a right, and then immediate left.
Huh? What should I be seeing?
Walls. It's a maze, kind of.
Okay, I see walls.
I guess stairs? Like maybe up and down just a little bit?
Okay.
What do you see at the moment?
Okay, so I'm looking at a painting on a wall.
Okay.
It's of like a pit bull dog that just loves to slobber, and he's got like a puddle of slobber in front of him. But anyway, maybe you wanted me to go this way. Okay, were we looking for the open blue gate door?
The open blue gate.
I just found that.
Yep, go through there, and in that room there should be a green switch.
Oh yeah, I see a green switch.
Go ahead and hit that.
Am doing.
And then is the gate... Actually, yeah. Is the gate that's kind of like above you, next to you, like that's a green thing, is that closed now?
I'm looking for a gate. Yes, there's a closed gate.
Okay.
It's you know, your map might be to scale, but it actually takes a while to move places.
No worries, I apologize.
I'm looking at the green gate that is closed.
Cool. Now I want you to run all the way back to where the blue gate, or the blue switch was.
Oh gosh, okay.
Yeah. Take your time.
3 hours later.
Hey, you know what we can do during this time, right? Ask another question. You had to stream any game for the rest of your life. What would it be?
Apparently Super Mario World.
Yeah, apparently. I mean, you're really good at it.
Maybe I should go with something like Red Dead Redemption 2, because I've never played it before, but I hear it's amazing.
I mean, yeah, go for it.
Do you want me to flip the blue switch again?
Yes.
Am doing. Oh, I see Morgie Corgi got it.
What?
I'm kidding. She didn't say anything.
What are you talking about? But yeah, so you...
I'm just crazy.
Okay. You say so...
Okay, fine. Flip the blue switch.
Yeah, now go through the other blue gate.
Man, where is that?
Take a right immediately after leaving that room, and follow that pathway.
Oh, I'm just wandering hard. Oh, I found a blue gate that's open.
Yep, go through there, and then you should see on the right side an open green gate.
Open green gate somewhere. I see an open green gate. I'm going through it.
Yeah, and then there should be a red switch.
Red switch somewhere. There's a red switch allegedly. Oh, I see it.
Yep. Hit the red switch.
I hit it.
And then run all the way back to the blue switch.
Ooh, man. Oh, this is so exhausting.
Yeah. Also, people say they'd love to watch you play Red Dead, so I don't know, maybe that should be like a follower goal of some kind down the line.
Yeah, maybe. I'd have to acquire the game.
Yeah, I mean, you can wait till it goes on sale.
I'd have to, like, I don't know. I'd consider it if I was, like, having income again.
Yeah, no, I understand. I'm not saying this is something you should do right now,
I got the blue switch.
Nice.
I'm
Now,
amazing.
head back to the green switch.
Should I flip it?
Yeah,
Did I
yeah,
flip
yeah.
it?
Yes.
Okay, I flipped it. Sweet.
Thank you for the
I
hydrate.
don't remember where the green switch is.
So after leaving the blue switch room, you take a left. You go to the end of that area, and you'll take a right. And then head to that area and take another right. Yo, it's Devontae! How you doing, bud? You feeling better?
Hey, Svante, do you want to swap in?
Wouldn't that be something?
Yeah. Okay, I got the green switch. Do you want me to flip it? I'm gonna hydrate though.
Yes, hydrate as well, please. Yep, I flip the green switch, and then you're gonna go. You have a toothache? Yeah.
Oh, that's a very good reason not to stream.
Yep.
Okay, I flipped the green switch and what? Huh?
And now continue down the pathway that the green gate just opened.
Shoot, it opened something? Dang. Okay. Oh, yeah, okay, thank you. I didn't realize.
Then immediately to your left should be an open red gate now.
Ah, yep, indeed.
And there you go.
Point reached.
Nice work.
And now our door's opening. We escaped the dungeon and the dragon?
Yeah.
Perfect play of the dungeon.
Yes. And you know what's also crazy? This next question. What's the craziest thing that happened on stream to you? Or what was your favorite moment streaming?
Oh, the craziest thing would probably be like my stream freezing. Like multiple times.
Has your computer blue screened?
Crazy things? Crazy things?
Mm-hmm.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't blue screen. Literally, just like everything freezes. I can see my OBS. My mouse stops working.
Mm-hmm.
I can hear audio for a little while, and then it just like goes blank. What was the other part of the question?
The other half was, what was your favorite moment streaming?
My favorite moment streaming.
Yeah.
That's ridiculous.
If you don't have one, that's also fine.
I don't know. Maybe when you followed me.
Oh. Do you remember that one very clearly?
Heck no, not at all.
I appreciate that. That means a lot.
I don't have a good answer.
No, that's fine. As I said, you don't need to have perfect answers for these things.
Yeah.
But if you,
oh no!
Yeah?
What the heck? Why am I interacting with? Apparently, I'm freezing to death.
Oh yeah, don't freeze to death. Just like your computer, right?
I interacted with something, and now there's like a cold effect around me.
Uh-oh. Oh yeah, Elias brought up a good point. The one time you streamed your wall.
Yeah, I mean that was a pretty good stream.
It's pretty crazy.
It was kind of. Oh, okay. So I remember one time in particular, I felt like really supported, and I was like totally surprised the support that I got.
Yeah.
I was watching Jack Hilo.
Yes.
And he was like talking about like ads or whatever on the stream, and he encouraged me to turn up my ad frequency, but what I did just like as a because they said so whatever is I went ahead and I started to stream after turning my ads to the maximum possibly allowed. Then I went and ran an errand for a while, and there was a surprisingly large amount of people hanging out in my chat, just accepting the ads. I think it was just my starting screen or something, and I said like point blank I had no intention of streaming. So.
Well, yeah, but I'd say that's kind of like a gimmick thing in itself, and it's kind of like your brand of humor and content.
I enjoy gimmicks a little bit, yeah.
Yeah, I also enjoy gimmicks.
Gimmick enjoyer.
And I also gotta say, speaking of Jack, super great person, very kind, very supportive.
By the way, I understand that we are just chatting right now.
Yeah.
And I'm not too worried about it, but I appear to be freezing to death.
Okay.
Because most of my screen has been covered with frost.
Oh man, we should probably do something about that, huh?
And as we've progressed, the amount of screen that has been covered in frost has increased a little bit.
Okay.
But I figure worst case scenario, I restart at the last checkpoint. No big deal.
Tell me, what's going on? Paint a word picture for me.
There appears to be a chessboard. I'm not sure if it's standard pieces exactly, but there appear to have been no moves done whatsoever. White versus black, ain't nobody been doing nothing. They're just like super lazy about the game, really chill.
Okay. Are there any symbols?
Actually, oh no, that's just a knight. I was like, wait, is that? I was like, some pieces have like weird stuff sticking out, and I realized that's the horses. So, let's see.
The horses are sticking out of them. Got it.
There's some statue with like their hands spread. Oh gosh, I'm freezing to death harder. I can hardly see anything, to be honest.
That's fair.
I've got like a, I would say I probably have like 10% of my screen I can actually see, and the rest is just covered in frost. So that's exciting.
We'll do the best we can until you freeze to death. Then we'll try again.
Okay, let's see. There was this place that had like a dial on it.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so there's like what looks like a machine with like a red button. A red like flashy thing.
Okay.
It's like a light. It's flashing, and then next to it there's like this temperature dial. I am assuming. I'm not sure. I can interact with it, but interacting with it just like zooms it in. But like the green area and the red area keep changing.
Oh.
Like, and the dial is bouncing left and right. Right now the green section is at the very end. I'm assuming that you need to do something to prevent me from dying.
Probably.
I'm not sure.
Elia says,
kind of busy.
Freezing to death 2, freezing harder. And
Yeah, let's freeze.
is it pronounced Binu?
That's some good content.
Bino? I forgot. I'm gonna say Binu.
Oh,
Binu likes to
I just
rewarm.
heard more frost noises, but I don't think it cut off any of my vision anymore.
That's good. You know, as long as you can see.
I'm not sure.
So the only things
I can see a little.
That's good. The only thing I really have to interact with is going to be a projector that says "World's Greatest Chess Move." So this is probably it, but it doesn't let me turn it on.
I mean, if I can interact with the chessboard, I haven't seen any indication of such.
Fair enough. Is there anything you interact with in general that might be connected to this?
The only thing I've noticed that I can interact with so far is that dial. That I can actually do. The little meter that's showing me whatever it's showing. Probably telling me about how I'm dying.
Probably. So I need to find a way on my side. I apologize. I'm slacking on my side. I have a film reel.
We may need to, what's the word? Just, die already so I can respawn with more visibility.
Nah, it's totally fine.
I don't know. They would just kill me already. This is so sad.
Can you just run back and stand inside the previous area?
When I went through, no, what they do is that
we died.
Doors behind me. Oh, I just
dang! I can't believe you froze to death. How could this happen?
How did that happen? This is incredible.
All right.
That's so sad.
This is so sad.
Okay. So once I go through this doorway, I guess I'm going to start freezing to death. Actually, as soon as the door opened, it started snowing in the hallway.
This is so sad.
Anyway, I'm going out.
Yep.
I'm going out. I can see. No, I totally get sealed out here. So I'm going to explore a little bit harder to see if I find anything of value.
Okay.
There's the chessboard. There's the statue with the hands. There's the apparent machine. It seems like it might have a crank, but...
Oh, yeah, crank it.
I don't think I can actually mess with it.
Dang.
No, I can't touch it. The red flashing light, like I said, there's a crank, but I can't do anything. The only thing I appear to be able to do is interact with this machine, and it shows like a dial of red and with a little green section. Oh. I just discovered that if I interact multiple times, I can actually stop the dial in the green area and it lights up something.
Oh, nice.
So this is my bad.
Very good.
Not realizing that.
I mean, we learn it as we go. Also, thank you, Bino, about the cutest violin.
Okay, so the machine now has 3 green lights above it, and I can no longer interact with it. Maybe I can play chess now.
Maybe.
I'm starting to freeze to death, which is great.
Can you move any of the pieces?
Not to my knowledge.
Interesting. Yeah, so I am running into a problem on my side. I have the film reel for the greatest chess moves, which is probably what we need for it. Unfortunately, I can't actually make it run. which is a very
Can't now. I don't know. I turned on some machine.
Let's find out. Work. Work. Please work.
The thing to rotate. I could now rotate, and I've rotated, and the light turned green
That's good.
instead of red.
Bino says to throw into the well. I don't think there's a well for me to throw it into, to be honest
And
with you.
now I can interact with the chessboard.
Nice. Let me try hitting this again.
But only white. Only white.
Naturally.
I mean, it's white's turn after all. So
Yeah, the white goes first in chess, usually.
Hell yeah. Absolutely.
Unfortunately, I still cannot, interact with this.
So should I just make random moves and hope to win like you did with the dials?
Yeah, sure.
Alright. Let's see. Let's move this pawn 2 spaces. Oh, and now I can do black? Oh gosh.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, alright. This doesn't seem like it's gonna work.
I mean, you never know.
Undid the first... Oh, okay, when I mess up, it just goes back. That's fun. Well, I'm definitely cheating at this game now.
Oh, hey, the crank works now. Wild. Who knew? Alright, yeah, here we go. It wasn't working before. Thank you, Bino. Alright, so first move is the pawn in front of... I can't tell. That's the, is it king on white type of thing? Or white king is on white? I already forget. I haven't played chess in forever. Oh my gosh. Yeah, okay. So the pawn in front of the king moves up 2 spaces is the first move.
Done initially as a guess, and it didn't tell me that was wrong, so... But
oh, hey,
now
Dan.
it
Thanks for the
appear
lurk.
to want to let me do anything. Okay, I guess maybe I was the wrong piece. But anyway, okay, we moved 2 spaces. That's the king, I guess.
Yeah.
Oh, the bishops are so... Oh, man, I can barely see again. Sweet.
That's
Now
fine.
what?
We figured it out. Okay, now it's going to be the opposite. The black side is going to move the same pawn to match.
So it's directly across?
Right, like touching tips.
Holy shit. Man. Did the pawn move 3 places or just 2?
2.
It won't let me move the king yet.
You can't move the king. Sorry, it says the pawn in front of the king.
Well, for some reason I'm moving the pawn and then it wants me to move the pawn again. Oh, there we go. It's working. Cool.
Yeah, because you have
Alright.
the... Yes.
We did it.
So
The
pawn...
touching tips.
Nice. Okay. And the next move is going to be... Give me 1 sec, because I'm watching the film again. It's going to be the bishop. That's right next to the king. You move it diagonally so that's in the same place... Or the same, like, line as the pawn. Like, horizontally.
Okay. I can barely see, but I think I did it.
Alright. It's interesting I can stand in front of this projector and I can still see some stuff going on. I wish I could pause it. Probably smart. Oh, so the bishop's in line?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay, so now the pawn in front of the knight on the black side on the same side... Huh?
Oh, on the same side. Okay.
On the same side as where the bishop is now. That moves up 1 space.
Is that the knight? Oh, I can barely see. 1 space, though.
Yeah, I can also read
Okay.
it in terms of like actual chess moves if you want.
Oh, that probably won't help me.
Okay.
I can barely see anything.
No, that's fair. I waited too long for this, so that's my fault. No, Bino, I know we're saying all these things proper, but the thing is, it's not going to help him out if he doesn't understand it.
I mean, I might, but
Yeah, fair.
carry on.
So the pawn goes up 1 space. So next, we're going to move the white queen diagonally 2 spaces, so it's going to go in front of the pawn.
Alright, we moved the queen. 2 spaces.
Yep. Give me a sec. I'm going to run this like every single time to catch up. Bishop move, and then it's the pawn move, and then it's the queen move, and then black will... The knight will go in front of where the other pawn... Oh, we're died.
Died.
Hey, that's fine. Hey, you know what's great? We can ask another question.
Sure.
So-
While I get the machine turned on again.
Yeah. So Nasty, why did you choose your username?
Oh, yeah, this is really, really lame, actually.
No, it's not lame.
So there was a phone game that I played all the time.
Yeah.
Like excessively.
Uh-huh.
That they just suggested a default name for me. It was like NastyTriangle plus like 5 digits.
Yep.
Or whatever. And I thought it was amusing, so I just kept it for the entire time I played the game, and then it just became my name.
Yeah, I mean, that works. That's fair.
This was years ago.
Yeah, but you kept it.
Yeah, I mean, why not? I mean, I've had a whole bunch of other names in the past, but this name was the name that I kept. Alright, well, the machine's on and cranked.
Okay. I'm cranking on the side, hitting the button. Let's see if it's the same thing. It probably is. If that's the case, we know how things are right away. Yep, it's the same thing. So white pawn in front of the king moves up 2 spaces. Black pawn in front of the black king moves up 2 spaces.
Yeah, I did the first 2 moves.
Bishop moves bishop on the right side of the king moves diagonally, so that's in line with the pawn.
Wait, really?
Like
No, that's
horizontally.
Okay, I messed it up. You said right side, and I did right side, but the wrong right.
The left side?
Yeah, it's kind of different when you're looking at the board the way I'm looking at the board.
No, that's fair. That's fair. I apologize.
Bonjour.
Bonjour. What's
Yeah,
up,
thanks for
squirrel?
apologizing. So I think the game's slightly scuffed because sometimes it doesn't like let me interact with black after I moved white. Kind of weird.
Maybe it's because he didn't move the white far enough to where it's supposed to be.
We moved the bishop. Now I think it was a pawn comes out.
It should be the pawn in front of the horse or the knight on the black side.
One space?
One space, yes.
Alright, done.
And then next is moving the white queen diagonally 2 spaces.
Okay, done.
Okay, and then next is knight is gonna jump L shape to like kind of in front of where the bishop is. Like one space
done.
in between. Done? Alright, give me a second to crank it again. And... Don't mind me, I'm just cranking it.
Queen to E7.
I mean, that is like the technical way to say things.
Yeah, it's a lot harder when you're looking at the board the way I am.
Yeah.
But whatever.
Okay, so...
I'm like standing in the board.
You are. Alright, after the knight moves, it's... Queen moves directly upwards to the... Take the pawn in front of the bishop.
Take the pawn?
Yeah. It takes out the pawn. Pawn never saw it coming.
Alright. We escaped.
Nice.
Now I
Dunzo.
can be alive again. Yay, the frost is gone.
Nice. Scroll says, oh, that bonjour took a long time to come? Ah, sorry. I can't help if it's slow. Alright, Nasty.
Okay.
What was your first video game that you remember?
The first video game that I remember?
Yeah.
I don't know if this is the first one, but it's one that I recall.
Yeah.
Youth.
That you remember?
There's frogs and flies.
Frogs and Flies.
Yeah, it's a classic Atari game.
Okay.
It's potentially 2-player. Basically, you are control a frog, and there's like 2 lily pads, and you can jump between one and the other.
Mhm.
The whole goal is to be the best at jumping your frog and eating flies.
Okay.
Super awesome.
Fair enough.
Okay, so there's a book in
Yes.
front of me
Okay.
that has symbols on it.
What are the symbols?
Okay, so we've got the flower cat,
Yep.
followed by what I would say is like, it's kind of like a stick figure, but there's no head, and it stops at the arms. The legs are super long, and they actually drew shoes.
Okay. And Squirrel says, maybe I'm lagging, I'm gonna reload. Okay, let me know how it goes. Oh, is the flower cat, like, bigger head than before?
Bonjour.
It looks
Bonjour.
the same in my memory.
Okay.
It's kind of like a tulip. It's like a classic
Oh, yeah. Okay, yeah, sorry.
flower.
I think I found one you were talking about. Okay, continue.
And then there's like, I don't know, kind of like a rounded in with like
a
a
fish hook.
Yeah, like a fish hook is underneath it, and up top there's like a circle with a cross across it. And then there's one that's like, I don't know, like an armor stand sort of.
Okay.
It's got like a base at the bottom, and then it goes up, and then it like hooks on both ends, and there's balls on top. And then up on the middle, there's also a ball.
Yep.
It's a 3-baller.
3-baller.
And then, yeah, and then there's something that looks kind of like a weird monster, sort of. It's like a box with like windows, I guess. But it's little tufts of hair on both sides.
Yep. I know what you got. I have the right book for this.
Okay, perfect.
So I'm going to give you directions, and you're going to have to follow them for going through like an area.
Oh, nice. Perfect.
So it says starting in the far west.
I have no idea what that means, but perfect.
Do you see any indication of which direction you're facing?
Let me test something. I want to see if... Okay, wait. So there is a set of tiles in front of me. So presumably it's trapped. Since you're saying starting in the far west. So I'm just going to start on the left side of it because that's traditionally west. Okay. So, okay, I've gone on the first tile.
Take 2 steps northbound.
I wonder if the first step... we'll pretend this is the second step. Okay.
Head east twice.
Yeah, we're trying.
Move north 2 times.
Okay.
1 step west.
Yep.
And then it says you can head for the door.
Oh, the door opened.
Nice.
We did that perfectly, apparently.
Yeah, we're good at this game. And then Squirrel says, that talking triangle face is hilarious. Reminds me of those old school games like Titanic Adventure Out of Time.
Yeah, well, the little tool, apparently you could use a GIF. So I was like, oh yeah, let's give myself a talking GIF. Why not?
Ladies and gentlemen,
so I made the point of making one. Oh, okay, wait, I'm hearing a voiceover. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the night's feature show. So, okay, I see like a trap door on the floor that I can mess with, apparently. And then there's like hooks on the wall, I guess. There's like 6 pegs. There's a scene 1 lit in white with a white lever. And then off to the right, there's blood light with a big switch that's down. And on both sides towards the entryway, there appear to be racks of outfits.
Nice. So yeah, I think this is going to be a thing where we're basically doing a play together. I have a gramophone thing that will tell me stuff, and I probably have to tell you what to do.
So what I can currently interact with is the scene 1 switch, the blood light switch, and the 6 pegs.
Okay. Let's see what this says real quick.
there once was a castle.
I'm hearing a little jingle. Like little music, I don't know why. Oh, there's another room I can go into that shows like looks like scenery with like that maybe we'll slide over to the left or something.
Gotcha. Do you have anything that can make a castle come up?
There's a crown on the far right, and then there's a sword over the crown, and then there's a like a bush with 3 stick figures dancing on it. I haven't noticed a castle.
Maybe it's one of the 6 pegs.
Sure, I'll mess with it.
Oh, shoot. There's a ghost in the distance. It's kind of spooky.
When I mess with when I mess with the pegs, it lets me rotate. Okay, I clicked the top left peg, and now it's like, hey, you want to rotate either of the other pegs?
Yep.
Clockwise or counterclockwise?
Yeah, just start hitting buttons and see what happens.
Okay, sure. So I rotated the middle peg on the top counterclockwise, and I don't know if that did anything.
Nothing that I see.
Alright. So I will mess with the other peg, also clockwise. I'm just going to rotate every peg clockwise.
I don't think the pegs are doing anything at the moment, to be honest with you. You might have to do
I called them
switches.
pegs, but they're actually levers.
Oh, levers, gotcha.
Or switches.
Try hitting the crown thing.
Okay, I think that the little display things that may have moved further to the right or something. I'm not sure.
Oh, maybe. Yeah, they might be on the far right or the far left. Maybe it's like it looks like there's things that could like slide out and in. Oh yeah, I see something.
Okay, I'm rotating one of the things like
Yeah.
excessively.
What else? Yeah.
I'm
What are we
hearing
doing? Do that to the
noise,
other
but I don't
ones.
see anything. Oh, one of the things has completely disappeared.
Okay.
The one with the 3 people on it is gone.
Yeah, that's the one I see out right now. So you slid it out to where I am.
Okay, let me try going the other way and see if it disappears.
Yep. You're sliding it back. It's like on a track. Do it one more
I did
time.
it Okay, one more time.
Yeah. What's the next one?
All right, here's another one. It's the bottom middle. I'm just gonna do it a bunch of times.
Okay. Yep. I see that. It's the king with a dead thing. I'm slowly dying, but yeah, go ahead and bring that back. What else? The next one?
Nice. I'm glad you're dying.
No, no worries. There's just like a spooky guy behind me, a marionette type of thing.
Nice.
My vision's slowly going dark.
Well, I mean, we'll just die when there's like pressure.
Okay, so that's like the princess.
I'm doing a third
or
one
queen.
now.
Yep. It's like the queen.
Okay, I'll put it back.
Is there anything on the other side?
There's 2 more dials, so...
Yeah. Oh yeah, that looks about right. Okay.
I just did one of them. Is something happening?
Give me a sec. Keep that there for now.
There once
Okay.
was a castle filled with life.
Okay, we need to bring the people back. The very first one you did?
Oh gosh, was that this?
No, not that one. The one before that.
Just tell me if it's the people.
Yeah. Yeah, that's people. Keep moving. One more time. Right there. See if that works.
There once was a castle filled with life.
Or maybe one more time. Or maybe that's all I can move. Alright, I think we need to get more people again. Maybe the third one.
I don't know which one that is. I'm sorry.
No, you're good. I guess that's something we should figure out, huh? So not the one you just did before this, but the other one after that. That makes sense.
I'm doing bottom left right now.
Okay, yep, keep going. Is that as far as we can go? Sounds good. Now, the other side ones, so like, before I stopped you, or after the castle one that went out.
Top right.
Yeah, that looks right.
There
Cool.
once was a castle filled with life.
I just keep doing it and nothing's happening.
Yeah, that's good. And then, is there another one? Like a third?
Yeah.
Well, go for that one.
There's another one.
Are there like symbols above each of these things?
No.
Cool.
No symbols whatsoever.
Oh, actually, undo that one, please. That's one we need to keep out for reals. Whatever that one is, that's the castle.
Is it good? Is
Yeah,
it good?
That's good.
Okay.
There once
Oh.
I just hit
was a
something.
castle
Wrong?
filled with life.
Yeah, put that back.
Okay. I'm doing another one.
Yep.
Anything?
I don't see anything right
No,
now.
Chad?
One sec. I might have to reset this. Let's see. What happens when we just go all the way over here?
Oh, we just died. Cool.
Yeah. Yeah, the marionette. So yeah, I have a timing thing where it slowly lowers my vision. So I think what we're gonna have to do is basically establish which one is which. Do you remember which switch into the castle specifically?
Maybe I should take notes or something.
No, you don't need to take notes. We'll figure it out on the fly.
Oh no, Than is streaming. I gotta start lurking there.
Okay, go for it, bud. Let me know when you're ready to continue.
I already clicked to say retry from checkpoint. I don't.
I know, I haven't hit it yet because I was gonna wait till you're ready. Because I'm on a timer.
sure.
But yeah, let's go. Alright, what game do you wish you could forget so you could experience it again?
Oh, what the? Oh, okay. Apparently we need to redo the maze.
Okay. Tell me what the 5 things are when you get the chance.
Okay, apparently it's different than last time too. So
Yeah, that's what I figured.
It's the tulip cat with the small flower head, and then there's the stick figure with no head and shoes at the bottom, and then we got it's the exact same symbols as before. The monster at the end, and the is that good enough?
Yeah. Star at the far west.
The path appears to have changed.
No, it's the same path.
I would forget to play again.
Yeah, one that you'd want to forget to play it again fresh.
I mean, you know, I'm just gonna go with immediacy bias or whatever. But I guess I really liked playing like Death Stranding, but it's not very fun anymore.
No, that's fair.
because I've almost 100%ed it.
Yeah, no, that's fair.
So,
I'd say, like, for instance,
so boring.
It's not boring. If you enjoy it, you enjoy it.
No, it's boring now.
Oh, it's boring now. Then yeah, I get you. Then I guess you don't
what
enjoy
do
I do? Starting in the far west, take 2 steps north.
I could have sworn I started in the far west and it spiked at me. Okay, anyway, go ahead.
Oh, what just happened?
And then I go... I don't know, our audio went weird.
It did. It glitched me out.
Okay, I went north. Now I need to go east, I think.
Yeah, head east twice.
Yeah, and then we go north again.
1 second, let me...
I went 1. I think it's 2, and then I go left, and then I go north. Maybe I'll just do it, because you're, like...
Okay, go for it.
Okay, we solved that puzzle.
Nice.
Alright, now I'm at the pegs.
Alright. Let me run over for here. So now we're going to be on a timer. Basically, yeah, do that all the way. So the first scene is basically, it says, there was a kingdom that was full of life. Everything's glitching. Nice. Yeah. So yeah, that's the kingdom. Now we're going to put all the life out there. So just put everything out as much as you can. And there's one thing...
I just keep rotating this, and I don't know if it's doing anything.
No, that's the one already done. Rotate the next one. Yep. Good.
As in I should have stopped? Okay.
Yeah, sorry. When I say good, I mean move on. Go ahead and move to the next one. That's good.
Stop it, stupid game. What's with your controls? So confusing.
Move that one back, actually. Keep that one all the way back for now. Yep.
All the way back?
Yep.
Okay,
Just keep it there for now. That's going to come later.
I'm going to stop, yeah, okay. And now the 5th one.
Yep. That's good. Oh, move it back.
Move it back again?
Yeah, you moved it backwards once. Yep, that's good out there. And then, is there a button for scene 1 that you can hit?
Yeah?
Yeah, go ahead and try hitting that. Okay, that's wrong. There's still something else that we can put in here.
It made like a weird noise.
Yeah. I'm wondering if we need to move the king and queen back. Well, I forgot, what was the 6th switch or lever? Because I can only see 4 things right now.
I can't actually mess with the 6th one.
Oh, perfect then. Okay, so then I think what we're gonna have to do is the 2nd and 3rd one you messed with. If you remember that, move those the opposite direction. Then get them out of scene.
This is the 2nd one.
Yep. Take that one out. Perfect.
Okay, you said perfect, so I'm stopping.
Yep.
I'm moving to the other one.
Yep. Cool, perfect. Now try hitting scene 1 again. Perfect.
There once was a castle filled with life.
There once was a castle filled with life. It said out loud.
Yep. So that's
now
scene
it says
1.
Scene 2.
Yep, give me a sec.
And there lived a king with his wife.
And then it says, and then there lived a king and his wife. So the 2 and 3, the last 2 that you messed with, just put those out real quick.
Is this the right direction? No, it's not making any noise, so it's wrong. 2 and 3. Okay. It seems to have stopped doing.
Yep, that was good.
Moving to the
Sorry.
next one.
Yep. I'm trying to think if we should... Yeah, put the castle out again.
Which is...
That was the very first one you messed with. Yep, that one. Alright, try hitting scene 2.
And there lives
Yep.
Yep, we're on scene 3 now.
his wife. All were happy.
Spooky.
Spooky. Alright, let's see what scene 3 is.
All were happy, and all was good.
Because all were happy and all was good. So, I guess put everything out.
Alright.
And then we'll move one back afterwards. Definitely glitching visually sometimes.
It takes a while to
Oh,
wind.
put that one back specifically. That's gonna be like the Act 4 thing where murder happens.
Okay, number 4 is murder.
Yeah, 4 is murder. Alright, cool. Now try hitting scene 3.
All
Scene
were
4.
happy, and all was good.
Gaming.
Gaming. Alright, let's see what's next.
Until the king killed all he could.
Alright, now we're gonna move number 2 out,
Okay.
which I think is the king. We'll find out. Move it once, just for me. Oh, nothing's moving right now. Everyone is happy until the Murder Nation attacks.
I'll move it more.
Yeah. Try moving the opposite direction.
That's right, it wasn't making a noise, so yeah, my bad.
You're good. Yeah, keep going. And then move 4 out. The one I told you not to do before. And then I guess put out the bloodlight.
Okay, Bloodlight. Hell yeah.
And then try hitting scene 4.
Until
Boom.
the king
Gaming.
killed all he could. Standing in blood, he proudly said,
Alright, go ahead and put 4 out again. Everything went back to normal, so the default, so we don't have anything on the thing. Thank you, Squirrel, for the gaming. I don't hear it though, which might be a concern.
Gamer.
Thank you. It was actually by you anyways. And then put out
I saw that.
the castle. Do you remember what that was?
I believe it's the first one.
Yep. And hit the scene.
It's bad.
Uh-oh. Let me try hitting this again.
standing in blood, he proudly said,
Is the bloodlight on?
Oh yeah, it is. Should I turn
Keep it on. Okay, just put move the castle back to nothing. The castle you just moved out? Yeah, just move it back. Alright, try hitting that scene again.
Oops, I tried to press it and I hit something else accidentally.
Oh, still not.
Good.
Uh-oh. I guess try moving 4 back.
4?
The one that's like the Murder King. And we're gonna try putting, I guess, 2 back in.
I made a numbering system in my head.
That's
so
fair. And then try hitting scene now. Perfect.
Stabbed in blood, he proudly said.
Hey, congrats, you got out.
Let me out. Let me out. Beautiful. Oh, hey, actually, that was the full game. I thought we were gonna take more time.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's funny.
We're just really good.
Wow,
I didn't
we're
even
too
got to my
good.
questions. Oh yeah, before we leave this place, I'm gonna rapid fire some questions for you because I haven't even made it through the first 10.
I appear to be dying.
Oh, you should find a trapdoor you can go through.
Oh, the trapdoor. Yeah, that's smart.
While you're escaping, is there a game that you've played off stream that you wish you could have played on stream?
I mean, people acted like they would have liked to watch me play Control.
Okay,
Which, you know, I have streamed a little bit, but mostly not.
fair.
So I mean, I don't know. I just like playing things on stream that people are feeling like actually watching, you know?
That's fair.
I actually don't know how to go in the trapdoor.
You just
Oh,
interact.
I did it.
Alright, now here's the thing. One of us has to stay and one of us has to go. So
We're
go.
friends now!
We're friends, but I have to stay on this thing. Because watch. If I do that, the gate closes.
Aw, dang.
You got this. I believe in you.
Okay, fine.
And while you go, let me ask you, how did you decide on your channel's aesthetic?
I don't really have an aesthetic.
Okay. I mean, you have like wacky stuff going on.
I guess I kind of do. I was just like, I don't know. I mean, I guess this would look okay. And then I'm not really artistic or whatever, but I'm like, sure, let's draw some triangles, I guess, on my triangle. To be honest, the graphic that I used, like the Nasty Triangle, it was made for me by somebody.
Really?
And I'm just using it because whatever.
That's fair.
Yeah. So
I always wondered where
like
that came from.
that was my name for like this phone game that I played called Empires and Puzzles, and I was in some alliance that was like Batman Returns or whatever.
Mhm.
So they made me a Nasty Triangle Batman, and I'm just using it because I don't have anything better.
That's fair. If you made if you wanted something better, like say you commissioned something down the line, you know, obviously or got it for free, what would you want as your representation?
I have absolutely no idea.
Okay. What about just the Illuminati eye?
Apparently I've been using my own face.
I mean, that's fair too.
So
What if you got
maybe
triangle glasses?
maybe I am me instead of me being something else.
That's completely fair.
It is fair.
Yeah.
But I mean, I'm not really hiding behind a facade of not being me. I'm mostly just being me.
I get you. I understand.
Is there something else you wanted to do? Since we
we kind of went through this pretty quickly. Do you want to try out the Battlegrounds thing? Learn it on stream?
I don't think it'll be great, but sure.
It's mostly a talk. There's a lot of idle time.
Hearthstone?
Yeah, Hearthstone.
Hearthstone. Yeah, okay. I'll open that.
Yeah, let me do this too. I mean, we can also chat for a bit too, but yeah.
I mean, that's fine. I'm not too worried about we're gonna be actively playing the game. I mean, we froze to death and we got haunted to death.
No, I mean, I didn't freeze to death.
Yeah, but you got haunted.
I got haunted to death. Actually, so before we
and that was my fault.
No, it's no problem. Before we go to the next part, I'm gonna do the middle point, and hopefully this doesn't break because I just tried this out the first time. We're gonna watch some clips of yours. Usually, I try to ask ahead of time for clips, but I just kind of picked 3. But they were in your featured, so.
Yeah, apparently this game's 2 hours and 48 minutes long. So.
Yeah, no, that's fair. We gamed very well. Because it's only It's only been like an hour and 22 minutes.
I mean, you remember there was one puzzle that you solved
Oh, immediately? You're not wrong.
without even discussing it. You were just like.
I just started turning valves. All right, you ready to look at your first clip?
I guess I should turn the audio on.
If you want.
Yeah, go for it.
Let's see if it works. It might break again.
I heard myself.
That was a recent one.
Yeah.
So, if you don't mind explaining some stuff there. That was, yeah?
You want me to explain?
Yeah. What was going on in that clip?
Well, I was playing a ROM hack. I think that's Beautiful Dangerous.
Okay.
I'm trying to make progress on some level that's pretty hard.
Mm-hmm.
But I have a redeem on my stream that's like big head mode. I need to mute the stream again. Yeah, that's like big head mode, and it makes my head larger and also makes me higher pitched. And then for some reason, I just started singing a little bit. Like it wasn't even like a normal sing. It was like singing in a high pitch, which was even more weird because I was pitched up. So it was like, beep, 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 you know, that sort of thing. And then you said in chat that you were dying.
Yes.
So I went back and I clipped it because I thought it was funny that you thought it was so funny.
That's funny that you thought it was funny that I thought it was funny.
I appreciated that you thought it was funny, so I was like, sure, let's clip this.
So for the big head mode, that's like a filter specifically. Is that related to StreamerBot, or is that a whole separate program?
It's 2 filters in OBS.
Oh, it's an OBS filter.
Yeah, one of them makes the visual distorted the way that I have it. It's a particular setting. And then the other one is like using like it's just an audio filter.
Okay, that's very interesting.
So,
all right,
yeah, for my StreamerBot, I just turn those 2 filters on. And
so you have your StreamerBot interconnected with OBS, though, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay,
of course.
I mean, I don't know. Sometimes things don't work that well. All right, let's look at the next clip. Are you ready?
All right, I'll unmute.
Big bounce twice. Big bounce up, big bounce right. Big bounce, bounce. And then I get to the right, and I land on the platform, and it'll immediately go zoop. So I have to go, ah! That's what I do next. I was describing that badly for fun. But
But you get it.
Yeah, big bounce. I get that 100%. Like mentally trying to map it out to do like the perfect execution. Like I've done that before, especially when I was playing. I want to say it was Unbound, that one Metroidvania platformer. That some really complicated things you got to do in there.
It's not bound, Squirrel. It's bounce.
Yeah, big bounce.
So I mean, this was just me playing the ROM hack, and I was at a new section, and I was trying to talk out what I believed needed to be done.
Yeah.
But sometimes people like to have it explained to you what you're thinking. So I explained like how I thought that should be done.
Yep.
But then I noticed I said big bounce a little excessively, so I did it too much.
Yeah.
Just because.
Playing the bit.
I'm like sometimes when I notice that I've done something excessively, I mean, when I say sometimes, I mean frequently I will double down on something if I think it's a little ridiculous to make sure it's actually ridiculous.
Yeah, like, I get that.
As a completely off-topic side thing, there was one time I was leaving someone a voice message, I remember, and at one point I was just like, wow, this was not a very good message, which I said out loud. And then immediately in my mind I was just like, wait, was this actually not a good message? So then I was just like, poop. Just said poop for no reason.
Yeah. You want to make sure that it was at least more crude.
I wanted to be correct.
Yeah. Instead of having any doubt about it. Like, oh man, I don't know if this is bad or not. Might as well just make it bad for sure.
Exactly.
I understand the mindset of that.
You don't want to be a liar.
It's a little self-destructive, but fair.
That was clipped by Ilias because she just thought it was funny.
Yes, I saw that. Yeah, just lean into it. Squirrel understands. All right, you ready for clip number 3?
Go whatever, it's fine.
This is my favorite one of the ones I was able to pick up.
Okay, enjoy Conquer Koala.
Why
Thanks
is
for
it
being
so
here.
long?
It's about like 50-something seconds. It's a vibe, I will say. Like, before you say anything about it, I didn't know, I haven't seen that clip before until I looked for clips today, and it is a vibe. I love it. You just look like you're having such a blast.
Yeah. So the explanation there was that
Uh-huh.
I was raiding.
Yeah.
I chose someone to raid, and like, you know, I think I was saying that I was gonna go, and then I kind of like stretched, and I saw myself on camera, and I just like, huh. I kind of looked like maybe I forgot that I was raiding. So then I just transitioned to dancing to the music.
Yeah.
So I did that up until like right before the raid timer was up, and then I was like, okay, bye.
I can tell. I kind of got that vibe. But I would say, specifically, that clip is very amazing. Probably my favorite one I've seen so far in general of your channel. And I think if you ever did like a channel trailer type of thing, that like the dancing part has to be on there somewhere. My 2 cents.
That was the context and the explanation.
Yeah.
So it was more like, oh, that was kind of a dramatic like little stretch or whatever. So yeah, let's just turn it into a little dance. Why not?
It makes me smile watching it.
It went on longer than I expected it to, and you know, I thought it by the end I thought it was a bit ridiculous.
Nah.
It was still going on.
It was great.
And the clip's really long, actually.
It is. It's I think 56 seconds entirely. But it's great. It's a vibe, as Squirrel says.
But yeah, Ilias pointed that one out to me, or maybe I pointed it out to her.
Mhm.
I don't remember, but I agreed that it was absurd. So maybe it's featured. I don't know. Maybe it should be.
It is featured.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to send you my Battle.net password. We're going to figure things out while playing this. I don't know how to do this. Not password, sorry. Battle.net, like,
Password?
my name. Not my password.
Oh, yeah. I actually got distracted and haven't even opened
No
Battle.net.
worries.
So
I have to update it again because all my files are corrupted in BNet and I hate it.
we were just chilling.
But yeah, that was,
Alert.
as I said before, I love that clip. It's just such a vibe.
Yeah, well, I'm glad.
Yo, it's High Surf. Sharing games. You wouldn't download a car, wouldn't you?
He's not sharing the game. He's sharing his like ID.
Yeah.
He's just letting me add him on Battle.net. So I should have sent you a request. Hopefully you saw it.
Let's see. Yep. I see you're missing an E at the end of your name.
Yeah, they'd like to not let me have enough letters.
Yeah. Oh, High Surf is asking for the clip. Do you mind if I play it again?
Oh, you can play it again if you want. That's fine.
Yeah, let's do it. Technically, I played GTA. That you download a car. Technically, this was clip number 3.
Oh, this
I may have broke it.
popular? Okay, I'm gonna feature it, I guess.
Like you literally can put this up for like your starting soon screen too.
Yeah, I mean,
You don't have
guess
to
so.
by any means. I'm saying you could. Or like your ending stream thing. Which fits, because it was ending stream.
yeah, I was rating.
Yeah.
This is what you do when you're rating.
I'm just not as good as a rating as you are, I guess.
Did you look at the I'm taking a short break clip when you were looking for clips?
I was kind of pushed for time, so I just kind of like, this looks good, this looks good, this looks good.
Koala, thanks for being here.
All right. Here's another recent one if you wanted to play it.
It's not going to do it that way. Sorry, man. Blocked. Because link.
Oh, yeah, fair enough. Oh, yeah, okay. My bad. I'll send it to you on Discord.
Yeah,
I see what
we'll
you
get there. I can't display it as is because of the way I have my setup set up for this. It's a really, what's the word? Not great setup. Let's go with that. Basically, I downloaded the
It's
clips
fine.
using the way you kind of told me about with the regex. I have them in a folder named clip 1, clip 2, and clip 3. I have a text document that tells me the times of each one, and I have it read from the thing what's okay. Play this clip whenever one is asked for, and only show it for like this amount of time. Because otherwise, it'll just freeze on the last frame.
Fair enough.
All right, let's see. So we're gonna go to Battlegrounds.
It's okay, but if you wanted to look at it,
Yeah.
it's featured now.
I will post it in my Discord as soon as it doesn't crash.
It's the one taking a short break. I had been struggling in the level, and
I want to see all my information
Go
here.
to the restroom,
That's fair.
and then I got up, and just for fun, I did a little scream in the bathroom, and it was very audible on my stream.
Fair enough.
So Morgie Corgi clipped it because.
Oh, was it the one where I know what you're talking about? I think I was actually there for that. Just lurking, though, of course.
Yeah, I mean, of course.
Savante showed up around that time.
Game,
Yeah, open the game when you can. No rush.
Hearthstone. Yeah.
I'm gonna see.
I'm clicking play.
Nice. I need to open up another thing anyways because I forgot to open it up. The audience questions.
Oh yeah, I have thought about asking myself a question there, but I decided.
Wow, we actually have 5 questions so far, which is nice.
I'm impressed.
Andrea says, "Lurk, gonna go make some food." Okay, take care, Andrea. Let me know what you eat or make. I guess doesn't necessarily mean you're gonna eat the food that you make. NastyTriangle. Okay, I'm gonna invite you to play Battlegrounds with me. So you haven't played this mode yet, have you?
Absolutely not.
Perfect.
I played like 4 matches of this game. Period.
It's ranked play. That's fine.
I
We'll learn.
literally installed it because you asked me to play with you.
Yeah.
And
I
then
appreciate
we
it.
haven't.
Yeah. Well, now we are.
And one thing that bothers me is like waiting for matchmaking, and then the game itself is strange.
Fair.
Well, whatever.
So this is an auto chess game. Don't worry about your decisions here. Just pick something.
All right. Well, does not care then.
Yeah. But basically, we're doing together. So like
Cool.
we can send each other units as need be, and we're basically fighting together.
I'm just gonna go ahead and like not think about it.
Okay. I would say the only thing to do is think about matching things, and that's it. So you'll see, for instance,
okay.
like some cards say Beast, Demon, Pirate, Cobra, or Undead. And if you get a bunch of those
I don't
cards together...
see anything like that yet, but
No,
okay.
I'm saying you will see that.
Oh, so it's like Rummy.
Sure. And you've never played an auto chess game before, right?
I believe that would be correct.
Okay, cool.
I mean, maybe I have.
No, that's fine if you have. And more or less is we pick units to put on the field with a buy,
Okay.
and then they're going to fight for us. So you have 3 gold. Every normal unit costs 3 gold, so just pick one of the different ones. It's actually, look at your screen. So for instance, you have the Backstage Security, the Wrath Weaver, and the Kindly Grandmother. And I would say just pick whatever one you want.
All right. Yeah, let's go with the grandmother.
Okay.
Just seems.
And then now that's in your hand, you put it onto the board, so just drag it right in front of you. Nice.
Okay.
Yep.
This game's amazing.
Yep. And then basically once the timer runs out, we will what's the word? We will fight other people, and it'll be automatic.
Wow.
Yep. That's what auto chess is.
Okay.
But let me catch up on the chat real quick. Squirrel says, I played in the first couple of years when I thought I was like empty or Magic Gathering, good at first, but the more expansions, the worse it gets. Yeah, I agree. So you see here, like now it's the actually auto battle. So we don't actually control this part, but the things we played are determine what's going on.
Cool.
Yeah, it's just something kind of
It's
idle
playing
to.
Warcraft music.
Yeah, it's gonna play Warcraft music. So since you have a beast thing,
so-
you can also pick the Kindly Grandmother a second time, and if you get 3 copies of
Sure,
them,
why
it'll
not?
combine together.
All right.
Yeah.
We'll take another kindly beast.
And
Why
since
not?
you have 1 gold, and you'll get more gold each turn, right? So if you look at the bottom right, you have 1 out of 4 gold. Yeah, you can buy that and hold on to it for now. I wouldn't play it just yet. It just gives you an extra gold later on.
Nice.
Yeah. You can also refresh the shop if you so want to, or freeze. Now, I will say, if you ever run into...
all the energies, so whatever.
Yeah, we're just kind of waiting now.
Okay.
I will say though, and you don't have to worry about it now. Obviously, it doesn't matter that much. If you buy any pirates, you get gold as well.
Oh man.
But I don't think you've seen any pirates yet.
Nah, I don't think pirates are real.
Okay, yeah, fair. But let me go through some of these questions while we go through this. So the first question is by Corgi Morgi. And Corgi Morgi asks, what's your favorite hack?
My favorite hack?
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, this isn't really a hack per
Okay.
se, but you know, back in the day, I thought it was really funny when you would use like net send message when you were like at work, and you could go ahead and like pop up little messages to like your coworkers.
Okay.
And that's probably not what she was asking.
No, but that's fair. Also, you can buy that
But if you're
third.
talking about like a Super Mario World,
Probably.
I guess I'd just go with like, I don't know, love yourself, because it's
Love Yourself is one I've seen you play a lot.
yeah. Or maybe Flo McNasty World.
I mean, you do have a world record at Flo McNasty World.
For now.
I mean,
But
it's been a
somebody
while.
did ask me permission to run it.
Ooh. So you can
Which was
buy.
amusing, because like, why would you ask for permission?
Yes. Yeah, there you go. Look at that.
Sorry,
If you-
I wasn't paying attention.
Oh, you're good.
So I
Go
didn't-
play it again. And then you can play that for a triple reward, which gets you something else. But and basically, you can pick something from there and put that on the field too. But, you know, no rush. We'll get there.
Oh, I just ran out of time.
No, you're good. You're good.
Whatever.
Oh, that's unfortunate.
I wasn't paying attention. So.
No, you're good. I love it. It's okay not to win this.
Yeah, I mean, I almost don't care at all.
Yeah, and that's fine. But let me catch up real quick in the chat. HiSerp says, I was just mad when all the work I did got pushed into Wild, and then I felt like it was starting off at level 0 again. Yeah, I get that. 100%. I'm talking about Hearthstone specifically. They kept changing things. Alright, I'm just going to let you play however you want then, and I'm not going to worry too much about it.
I'm just choosing random stuff because I don't care.
Yeah, that's fine. Next question is... Oh, this one's by Morgy Corgi. And the question they ask is, who's your favorite raccoon?
I mean, let's see. I don't really picture you as a raccoon, but
Fair.
your PNG is kind of cool.
Cool.
So I'm gonna go with Sly Cooper.
That's a very fair answer. You know, I've never actually played any of the Sly Cooper games, even though it's been on my list, especially since the people who made that game made Infamous, which is one of my favorite games.
Yeah, well, I mean, I played some of it once, and you lurked a little bit.
I did.
I mean, I would say that if you're gonna play it, you can go ahead and give the first one a miss.
Okay.
I mean, it's fine. It's just not as polished, or it's different. It's a different game.
Yeah,
2
I get
and
you.
3 are both good.
Gotcha. Morgy's here. Welcome, Morgy.
She's finally here.
I just
about
asked a
time,
question.
Morgy. We asked a question from Corgi Morgy too.
Yep.
Wanted to know what my favorite hack was, and I said it was like net send message, which you used to be able to like send like instant messages to people over like the work network, which was weird because there would be little pop-ups. But I think most places have disabled that by now. But it was an interesting hack. Whatever. Oh, I should be shopping.
You don't have to.
Yeah.
Here, I'm going to send you something to play.
Well, I bought something. I'm just picking like whatever.
Yeah,
I don't
that's
even know
fine.
how much stuff costs. It's like how do you know how much something costs?
So every minion costs 3 gold, and then the spells have the different numbers on top of it. And then you can drag things on your board if you want to get rid of them to the tavern guy and sell it yourself.
Oh,
And if you have 1 gold, if you hit the star to the left of them, you can upgrade the shop so you can get better stuff next time.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Did it?
But yeah, you can
I mean,
only...
the amount of thought I'm putting into this, it might as well be marbles.
Yeah, no, that's perfectly fine. As I said, the way I play idle games is just kind of putting stuff on the board and seeing what happens. I mostly, if anything,
Yeah.
just match things together. It's like, oh, hey, I'm going to go whatever says the beast tag on it and hope for the best.
I'm making no effort at strategizing.
No, that's fine. By no means am I going to get angry at you at all or even frustrated. It's just fun things to watch, numbers and, like, oh, dopamine, I won somehow. Morgan says, I just don't even strategize. That's fair. All right.
I'm not strategizing either, Morgie.
Yeah. All right, so
Oh no.
next question. Illy
Looks
asks...
like I've been slaughtered.
Oh, you're doing great. Better than me. I only have 1 minion.
I think I only have one.
No, you have a bunch of minions. That minion was mine.
Oh, that was your sign?
Yeah.
Oh.
So if you are interested, you don't have to. If you click the little portal on the right, you can see my
Yeah,
board.
I noticed that. You've got a 12-13. That's pretty good.
That's it.
I don't even know if I can buy anything. This is ridiculous.
I mean, yeah, you can buy stuff. You can also sell stuff for 1 gold each.
That seems like a waste.
I mean, if you need to make stuff in the room on the board for more things, then it's not bad.
Hmm. Okay. All right. So next question.
Yeah. Next question is by Illy, and Illy asks, "What type/genre of game does Nasty actually prefer? What would he say are his favorite games?"
So I usually prefer games that are like active,
Okay.
obviously,
Like what?
where like it requires like frequent input from me.
Okay.
Like I actually really liked like action RPGs back in the day. Like I played like a ridiculous amount of like Secret of Mana.
Okay.
No, well, I don't mean like Dark Tide. Dark Tide's like, you have no time to think even.
Gotcha.
Now I'm not saying that like bullet hell isn't sort of fun sometimes, but like it's just different. I mean, I don't know. I used to play a whole bunch of like RPGs. Like I played lots of like the Final Fantasy games.
Okay.
Or whatever back in the day.
Yeah.
But then there just like came this time where like I just didn't want to play games where I couldn't play them for like 5 minutes and then technically sort of have some progress.
Gotcha.
Let's see. Da, 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 da. Da, 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 da. And then my life changed or whatever, and I reached the point where I just felt like I could never play a game that like I didn't have to just at any moment need to drop it.
Uh-huh.
So then I started playing like RuneScape, which I don't recommend.
Fair.
I haven't played it for over a year, and I don't have any desire to.
Mm-hmm.
MMORPGs suck, in my experience.
No, that's
It's just
fair.
like, after a certain point, all you're doing is just grinding, and I don't want to grind something like that. I mean, it's weird because I'll like grind the Super Mario, but I don't know. I don't have a good answer to this. But apparently I don't like games. That's what I found out last week.
I mean, I wonder if it's not so much that you don't like games. It might just be more along the lines of like it's hard for you to get immersed into games.
That may be true. Like for example, I've tried playing like quote unquote scary games, and I just don't take them seriously at all.
Yeah. And I think that's a part of the immersion thing.
Yeah, because I'm not immersed even remotely.
Yeah.
But anyway, this game personally seems like, I don't know. Are we playing a game?
Sort of. Auto chess, I'd say, is more of like
one.
planning. So it's basically planning around and just hope for everything goes well. You can
I'm sure.
Yeah.
I'm sure if I strategized harder,
Yeah.
it would feel like a game. One game that I've been playing on my phone,
Mhm.
sometimes it's like I don't really understand why I'm playing this. It's Marvel Snap. I don't even enjoy it.
Oh, you've been playing Marvel Snap.
It's just something to do,
Yeah.
you know?
An idle thing, and it's pretty quick.
Well, it's not entirely idle, but one of the things that's really annoying is how it's like pay to win, and
Uh-huh.
people have their like, haha, we beat you with these cards you've never seen.
Yeah.
It
It requires a lot of in-game knowledge.
You don't have, etc., etc.
Mhm.
Yeah, like occasionally you'll lose to like some sort of like, haha, look, they did some crazy thing that you didn't even know was possible.
Yep.
Take that, nerd.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, I don't know.
No, that's
I don't have
fair.
a good answer to that.
I think that's okay, though. I think sometimes, you find games that you vibe with, and sometimes you don't, right?
I like games that are interesting.
Yeah, but your definition of interesting is kind of different, right?
Yeah.
You can't just be like, oh, I like games that interest me. It's like, yeah, that's kind of the point of saying that you like games that interest you, you know?
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty obvious that you like games that interest you.
Uh-huh.
How are you doing on minions? Because you got tons. I have so many cards. It's like, why is my board full?
Nasty,
Like, are
I
you
did say
trying to
before,
kill me?
sell stuff.
Why would I sell it? To
So you
get
get-
more money so I can buy more things?
So you can place other cards that are better.
Wait, you can sell things that are on the board.
Only on the board, yes.
Oh,
So, for instance,
that
I'd probably
makes more
sell the
sense
Wrath Weaver,
now.
the middle guy, the gnome.
Yeah, that's what I was going to sell because he's kind of garbage looking.
Yeah. But-
but whatever. I guess I'll put a whale boar. I don't know.
Okay.
Oh yeah, the subjective criteria of interesting. It's very good.
Yes.
I don't know. I failed to get into like first person shooter games for the most part,
Okay.
unless they're like single player, and that's probably just because I'm bad at them,
I understand that 100%.
or at least I feel bad at them because like I just haven't had any experience with them for like so long
Mm-hmm.
because I have no friends. Or I had no friends that wanted to play those. It seems like most of the multiplayer games out there
Mhm.
that you would play more than like trivially are like first person shooters or whatever. But like I said, I just didn't have friends. So I had no reason to play them. Like I played GoldenEye quite
Mhm.
a bit, GoldenEye 64 back in the 90s.
Oh, yes, the old days.
Yeah, back in the 90s.
Uh-huh.
I played that one quite a bit, but I haven't really played any of those like first person shooter games since then, in anything beyond like a trivial degree.
Uh-huh. I mean,
But I don't know.
sometimes it's just all about playing with friends or just hanging out. But I also understand, like, there's a lot of games that I don't really enjoy a whole lot.
Mm-hmm.
Just,
Yeah, we
kinda-
should play Dark Tide sometime.
I mean, we can. I just don't, I feel guilty sometimes. And you're like, oh, it's just not super fun to me. I'm like, that's fair.
Yeah, I understand that you feel guilty, but I mean, I can play a game I don't like to hang out. I mean, I'm playing this right now.
Yeah, but we're not really playing. We're mostly just chatting.
That's true. We're just chatting. See, it's not even a game.
Yeah. That's why I kind of said, like, we should try this one out real quick just because it's, like, an idle thing to do while chatting.
Yeah.
But,
I mean, I prefer games that at least feel like games, too.
I mean, to be fair, Nasty, this is a game, and
Oh,
it's just
I
that you
know.
don't want to learn some of the stuff.
No, it's definitely a game.
I think, you immerse yourself a little bit in some of these games to actually enjoy them.
Yeah, I'm sure that's true. I have this good ability to talk really harshly about things.
Yeah.
So that's a skill.
There's some-
Okay, so you said
Yeah.
something about playing demons. You can you can stack the same sort of
Yeah.
something.
Ideally, for you, it'd be playing pirates, but, whatever works for you. You
Yeah,
also
I guess
have
pirates.
the bird thing on the far left on your thing is really good for
Pretty huge.
beasts. Yeah. If you read what it does,
I
it's
think my board's full though.
it is. You have to sell something.
Whatever. I'll just destroy that. Play a pathetic little beast.
That's fine.
That's actually the only beast I have. So whatever. That's fine. I haven't used most of my energy.
And you can always use the money to upgrade your shop too.
Sure.
You don't have to.
Perfect.
You just
No,
get-
I did it.
Better stuff. you'll see like each of the cards has like a little star value on it. Usually the higher star units are better.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Next question is by Morgo the Corgo. Would you own a pet rat?
Would I own a pet rat?
Yeah.
I mean,
I think you can win this thing.
would you wear wigs? Would I?
Where's the wigs thing from, by the way?
Yes. Would I want to own a rat? Probably not. I'm not much of a pet person in
Fair.
general.
It's if I remember correctly. It's not your cat. It's like what, your wife's cat?
Well, yeah, we have 3 cats in the house. One of them's obsessed with me.
Naturally.
In a way that like I find really aggravating. Because like basically anytime I'm in the kitchen, he'll be like, I'm rubbing up against your leg, maybe I'm grabbing your leg or something, and I'm just like, far out, leave me alone.
Mm-hmm.
And I will definitely run away from like the cats trying to pay attention to me.
Naturally. I think that's one of the reasons why they like you, though.
That's why I've got a locked a door that's closed.
Yeah, the one that creaks, right?
I mean, ultimately, I've never really enjoyed pets, which is kind of weird why I had children to begin with. But, I had to do that because that's what you do.
Yeah, that's what you kind of were raised to do.
It's not the same. It's not the same, obviously, but there are similarities. All right, so I guess we're doing beasts because that's what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Oh, I can't.
Well, that's very nice of you to take care of the pets, even though you don't care about them as much.
Yeah, I mean, she's got ADHD, so like oftentimes she just won't even think to feed them
Fair.
or whatever. And I'll be like, "Oh, the pet wants my attention. I should go ahead and cuddle it or whatever." And it's like, really, it's trying to get fed, So
Yeah,
it's fun.
I get you. All right.
Just wasting money.
And then question number 5 for you, and the last one we have so far. I'll take a look at it again, when we're finishing up as well. But
yeah, that's fine.
Patrick Cat asks, "How do you like your steak?"
How do I like my steak? I'm gonna go with like probably like medium, I guess. I like it a little bit juicy.
Okay.
I don't really have steak very often because like it's expensive.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's the thing about steak.
Okay.
I'm gonna say that like no question whatsoever, pork steak is superior to normal steak.
Pork steak?
Now, I know this sounds ridiculous, but pork is just so much cheaper.
No, that's fair.
It's so much cheaper. And so the utility value price to like taste, pork steak is like way up there because beef is like crazy expensive.
Yes.
And obviously when we talk about steak, you're talking about beef, at least in this country.
Yes.
So I'm not really a steak either.
Fair.
But I will eat pork steak. Chicken, I don't know about it being better. I mean, obviously you have your own opinion. But I don't know why you would say chicken's better. That's kind of intriguing.
I mean, I agree in the sense of like chicken's better, but that might be down to like the whole like convenience thing as well. I mostly eat chicken.
Sense? In what sense, though? I mean, I don't get it.
No, that's fair. I would say I know how to make a lot more things with chicken than I do with pork and such. Not that I can't. It's just more of like it's easier to just buy like a bunch of chicken breasts, and then make stuff using that.
I mean, that's definitely true. I
mean,
if it's we got third place.
We did get third place because we're gaming.
We didn't lose. We actually won.
Yeah, we did
against someone.
We beat one other person.
Rating went up by 0. It was perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you want to switch to just chatting, or do you mind doing this again?
I mean, it doesn't really matter. It's not the same. I actually didn't do anything for the last 2 rounds because I just didn't care.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really eat beef, and yeah, it's really expensive. And honestly, pork is just a treat. We have chicken more often because, like, chicken's cheap and easy.
Chicken is cheap.
Blah, blah, blah. So, But yeah, I mean, I'm weird. I'll eat like pork steak with just like a little bit of seasoning on it, and
Mhm.
just eat it plain.
I mean,
Besides that,
I don't think it's weird.
it's delicious.
Yeah, if you enjoy it, it's not weird.
It's totally weird to enjoy food you like.
Oh, okay. I apologize.
Yeah.
It is weird. You're so weird, Nasty. How dare you enjoy food that you like, that tastes good to you? What's wrong with you? You should only be enjoying food that you don't like.
Okay, fine. I'll leave the call.
Oh my gosh. Hey, Nasty.
We talked about GLHF, this time standing for Garbage Lord had
Had friends, yes. Nasty told me beforehand that this stream is going to make it so that we hate each other by the end of it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I started streaming primarily because you were a streamer, and I thought that I could do better than you.
Yeah, I mean, Nasty is who I consider to be my Twitch rival. Because we have like a very similar growth in terms of like, getting followers. But also, I stream a lot for like, doing wacky stuff down the line, right? But Nasty does so much more wacky stuff and like more often than not. And I'm always impressed by it.
You mean like how I just immediately jumped on the, okay, April 1st, let me stream my wall.
Yeah, you just right into it, and I respect it. You also did the whole bouncing webcam thing, which I just brought up to you.
Oh, yeah, well, you told me I should have that, so I'm like, okay.
Yeah, I didn't even tell you to have it. I was like, hey, can you do this? And they're like, yeah, I can probably do that. And then you did it, and I think it's amazing.
It's so easy, but you don't care.
It's easy for you because you know how to do these things.
Yeah, okay.
I want to say it's like necessarily like an easy thing, and I think you're just downplaying your own ability to do stuff.
Mm-hmm. That in particular was very easy.
Right, yeah, I'm sure it's something you could figure out pretty simply, I know.
Yeah.
But you have a bunch of other things, too, that probably take more work.
Maybe.
Yeah, like Morgan says, Nasty is so fancy. I think you're downplaying yourself, but I also respect you downplaying yourself. Stay humble.
That's right.
Okay,
You
now
have a big head, loser.
we're in the section where you ask me questions.
Okay.
If you don't have questions, that's fine.
Why are you a raccoon? Why is it blue behind you?
Okay, yeah, that's a fair question. So the reason
Why
why...
acronyms so much?
So what? Why do I like acronyms so much?
Yeah.
Are you going to let me actually answer these questions, or you just keep rapid fire asking them?
I haven't decided.
Okay, fair enough.
Talk.
So to start off with why raccoon, I chose the name Garbage Lord first before I actually chose to have it represented as a raccoon. And there is actually a safe picture in my image folder of Oscar the Grouch with like a crown on his head, which is another one that I was considering as like a picture to use. And I think I actually used it in one account I have for How Long to Beat, because I was on there briefly. But I decided not to do raccoons.
Would you ever consider switching to maggots?
No, I would never consider going to maggots.
Yeah, I didn't think so, but I thought I'd ask.
No, that's fair. I appreciate you asking. No, I decided, raccoons are cuter for sure. Way easier to have as representation for things. I think the only problem I have with it is it's also just very well, it's used by a lot of different people as well. So I kind of I wonder, am I even creative in this sense? How do I pick something that's creative that someone else hasn't already done in this situation? But at another point, I'm like, hey, whatever. Now, as opposed to why it's blue in the background of in the PNG, well, I'll tell you, it's because I want to say this is when Nadiria was doing a charity stream type of thing a while back at this point. And it was one of the things was drawing a thank you thing. So I was like, yeah, I'll do that. Because I love art in general. I love it when people make things. And this is one of the things I really like is it's made for me. It's a representation for me. I love it. Yeah, knife. But yeah, she basically drew a raccoon wearing an outfit for Honkai Star Rail, which
Oh, I see.
still a fan of. But I basically just cropped the raccoon part out of the thank you message or thank you picture with her, her blessing in that situation, and was have that as my PNG tuber part because I really like it and it's unique to me.
So you said something about how you were worried about being creative with your raccoon.
Yes.
Why are you so concerned about being creative?
I love creativity. I crave creativity. I feel I need to constantly like be creative, not so much like prove myself, but because more of like an outlet. Because I just have like you know how I am. I have a lot of different ideas, constantly turning out new ones. And one way I can kind of say it is I have like a spark in my heart that if I don't find a creative outlet, I get very, very restless. But I guess it's kind of like in the sense of like expressing myself and wanting to inspire others.
So basically, if I'm understanding you correctly, you have to be creative with your stream because it's a place where you can do it.
Yes.
And if you weren't able to do it there, then you'd probably just explode with creativity.
Yes, if I can't find any place to express it, I would explode.
Yeah, all that pent up creativity would just spill out all over the place.
Yeah.
In a bad way.
In a bad way.
Yeah. What else could I ask a garbage lord? Now that you'll finally answer my question.
Yeah, I've never answered any question from you ever beforehand.
Yeah. I don't have anything good right now.
Okay, well, if you think of it, let me know.
I didn't plan very hard.
I mean, it was very last minute. I appreciate the spontaneity of this, accepting it so quickly.
Sure. I mean, I told you I'd be your friend if you asked.
Yeah. All right, then I'll move on to the random questions. And if you have any other questions to ask, by all means, ask them. This is the moment. You don't have to spend any channel points for this.
Oh, dang.
But let me reload this real quick just to make sure. Okay, yeah. All right. Pokemon or Digimon?
To watch or to play?
Either.
Yeah,
just
I'm gonna go with Digimon.
Digimon? Okay. Did you watch it or did you play it?
It's got a... I don't know, the theme song is silly. I love how silly the
English
theme
one?
song is. Digimon, digital monsters, Digimon are the champions.
Yep.
Changing to digital champions to save the digital world.
I'm impressed how much you remember it.
I've got to be the very best.
Yep.
No one ever was.
Bum, bum,
To
bum.
catch them is my real test. To train them is my cause. Anyway.
Have you ever considered...
It's a hard toss-up.
Yeah? Have you ever considered being a singer? Or like doing covers?
I've had people tell me that I could do that.
Yeah.
But when I actually listen to myself, I sound like shit to me.
Well, to be fair, I think a lot of people think that about themselves.
I mean, really, it could come down to like recording quality or something. I will say there was a streamer that I watch. We've talked about him before. Flo McNasty TV.
Yeah.
He had one like joke track that he was making that was called it was like Keep It in the Family. That for some reason he decided he wanted to get voice samples from his chatters.
Okay.
Whatever. To I think we had to sing like Gotta Keep It in the Family, I'm Gonna Marry Your Grandma.
Okay.
Or something like that. And just because I felt inspired or whatever, I went ahead and I sent him 3 audio clips in 3 different octaves.
Naturally.
Of the thing. And I remember when he was doing like the what's it called? Whatever it is with the mixing or whatever, he was just like, "Oh, this one's good. I don't need to pitch correct it." And he said that for all 3 of them. He didn't have to do any auto tuning.
Yeah, seems like you're doing really well then.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I used to back in my cult. One of my favorite things was the congregational singing.
Okay.
And I was known for the fact that I am loud.
That's good though. Projecting your voice.
Loud, but also sounds good. There were people who would be like, I want to stand next to Nasty while we sing this in, because then I can follow him and I can feel like I'm doing good.
I mean, that is a really nice talent, but I also understand why you might not want to, try it out yourself. But I will say,
there was one time when I was in Australia. This is ridiculous. And this is bad behavior on my part, I suppose. But there was one time we were in the congregation and the person who was playing the piano was playing the song probably the slowest I had ever heard anyone play it before. And it was just absolutely insane. So I actually I actually just sang it a little bit faster.
You're trying to push them forward?
And everyone just followed along.
Nice. You were taking the lead of the beat in a way.
I mean,
the rhythm.
If you turn a song into a dirge when it's not supposed to be a dirge, it's just messed up. Like we used to do that back in like my friend group. There was this song that we would sing. It was like the Boy Scouts or whatever. It was some stupid song, Ravioli.
Okay.
That was to the same tune of Frere Jacques.
Ah.
And I had a friend who was just like, I want this to be my funeral song.
Okay.
And so we're just like, ravioli, I like ravioli. Ravioli, it's the best for me. Do I have it on my chin? Yes, you have it on your chin. On my...
I was just going to keep going.
I just kept going because you weren't saying anything.
No, I was enthralled. No, for real, Nasty, as I said, I understand why you might not want to, but I am saying it is something that you do really well based on what I've heard so far.
I don't think that I could. I think it's way too competitive, and I'm not that good.
I would say
I would need to have actual training.
Okay.
It's not really feasible.
Okay. I mean, I think you're kind of viewing it in the competitive way of like, I want to be the very best, like no one ever was.
Well, I mean, no. If you're going to be like actually successful as like a singing person, then you have to like.
Okay.
Blah 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 blah.
Yeah.
Blah.
Okay.
I did at one point play with the idea of like having a redeem where I had to sing stuff, but no one ever redeemed it, so whatever.
Oh, did I miss that redeem? I would have redeemed it.
It's okay.
Next time.
We got third place. It was a rating of 0. Anyway, often when you like sing things just off the cuff, you deliberately don't try very hard, and you kind of sound worse. I mean, that's just how it goes.
Fair. I mean, I'm going to disagree in that situation for you specifically, but I also understand where you're coming from. So
yeah, fair enough.
Fair. And just so you know, I meant less of like a competitive side and more of like a what's the word? Just for funsies type of thing. That's all.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I used to do a lot of my cult. There was actually like occasionally I'd do solos. There was a time when we did like my wife and I would do duets. She's actually really good at singing. She's probably better than me. She has actual choir practice. She did choir in high school. And she was, she's actually good at it. So
well, maybe you just have that raw talent that you just need to refine.
That's the thing I miss the most from like the cult, the singing.
Okay.
I mean, I've looked into like the local choir, but the local choir is also religious, and they happen to meet at the building where I went to church.
Oh, yeah.
And so I'm just like, nah, I don't want to be involved.
What about karaoke?
I've done karaoke before.
Do you enjoy it?
But not for a long time.
Yeah.
And anyway, like I said, if I actually hear myself, I'm just like, ugh.
Okay, that's fair. But, that's also a very natural thing because it's the whole thing where, like, you hear yourself usually from, like, the inside of your head as opposed to being projected out. So it's always going to sound weird.
Here's what I'll say, which is kind of strange. And I think it really comes down to, like, how you're being recorded, and I probably don't have the best sound set up or whatever.
Okay.
But like if I like record myself with my phone like in my car, I sound more reasonable than I do using my streaming setup in my
Interesting.
phone, which makes no sense. It just means I guess my mic is that bad.
I mean, I don't think your mic is bad personally, but
no, that's fair. I appreciate that. Thanks for not thinking my mic is bad.
Of course not.
It might be a bit of a hot mic, as Jack Hilo likes to say. Since, it hears my door squealing.
It does hear a lot.
And if I shriek from my bathroom, you could hear it.
Yeah.
The thing is, I've fiddled around with other settings, but people just were like, this doesn't sound as good. Like, fine, whatever. I'll just leave it how it is. Yeah, it's not just off. It's literally that shriek. That was me. I left my room. I probably shut the door. I went into an adjacent room, and you could hear it perfectly well, as if I hadn't even left.
Yeah.
No, sorry, I didn't do it. I didn't really commit.
That's fine. You don't have to commit to that. But I appreciate the attempt. All right. The next question I have for you is: can you describe your perfect burrito?
My perfect burrito.
Yeah. What's the perfect burrito?
I'm really lame.
No, that's fine.
But I guess I would go with like a burrito. I'd probably put some like lettuce and some cheese on there,
Okay.
for like being healthy
Uh-huh.
or something. Some sort of meat, and that's probably where I'd stop it. Honestly, I don't.
So
really like
lettuce,
the
tomato,
hot
and meat?
sauce. I don't really like the hot sauce
Uh-huh.
because bleh.
Okay.
And I honestly, anything that like once you like start delving into the realm of where it's like it actually tastes like quote unquote Mexican,
Uh-huh.
I'm less likely to enjoy it.
Really?
It's horrible.
Okay.
It's horrible.
So no beans, no cheese.
I mean, you could put beans in there, but they wouldn't necessarily improve it.
Well, I mean, this is your burrito.
Just don't make it queso.
Okay.
I mean, queso is messed up. It's like, what did you do to this cheese?
Fair. And you don't like hot sauces, you said.
Yeah, I mean, it's just opinions, man. It's
No,
just
that's fine.
opinions. But yeah,
I guess-
I'm not a seasoning kind of guy. Like, I don't use ketchup. I don't use mustard.
Yeah.
Pickles are just like, you're trying to make me retch.
Is it just a very strong vinegar taste, right?
I'm very much a white food eater. If you know what I mean? The stereotypical white food. That's
Do you like mayonnaise?
I mean, if it's done properly. I actually prefer Miracle Whip.
Okay. Acceptable.
It's got the zip, baby.
Yeah. I'm not actually a huge fan of mayonnaise. But
yeah, I mean,
my brother's allergic to
mayonnaise. Okay, so it's kind of weird.
Uh-huh.
Like, I've never enjoyed mayonnaise
Mhm.
from what I recall. And honestly, Miracle Whip, not sure I really enjoyed that either. But there are certain things that for some reason I've just been trained that like you eat this lathered in Miracle Whip.
Okay.
Like for example, tuna.
Uh-huh.
Tuna, you want to have like maybe 60% Miracle Whip,
Mm.
40% tuna or something. Which is insane. And then you do a similar thing with like an egg salad.
Okay. Would you put mayonnaise on your burrito?
I mean, I would probably regret it.
Miracle Whip, I guess, specifically. Fair. Okay, so lettuce...
I probably wouldn't put Miracle Whip on it either.
Okay. So lettuce, tomato, and a meat. What meat? Would it be pork?
I'm saying that vegetables are okay.
Okay.
As long as they're relatively flavorless.
What about like
lettuce has like no flavor.
Bell peppers?
It's just bell pepper. I mean, I could eat it, but I wouldn't want to.
What about cauliflower?
I mean, I guess that'd be fine. Whatever.
Like maybe like some rice cauliflower?
Strange, but it's fine. Rice cauliflower. Now I've heard of that, but I don't really know what it means.
So rice cauliflower is basically like you cut it into like very small pieces, so it's like about rice size.
I mean, I guess that'd be fine.
Yeah.
Cauliflower is very bland.
It is. It takes on the
prefer my
taste.
food bland.
Fair. I make my own rice cauliflower.
Yeah, give me your bland food.
That's
Say
fine.
it's white food, and I'll be like, sweet.
No, no, that's completely fair. I would say it's kind of like people will joke about it, like, you know, it's kind of like the a British taste type of thing, where it's like, you know, a lot of plain foods.
I was watching TikTok the other day, and this guy was talking about like white food.
Yeah,
it's just like, you know, you knock white people, but they have found like a really great way to make food that is at least edible, and it's not expensive. And that's like, you know, that's perfect. It's edible and it's cheap.
Okay, let me ask you this question then. Not my random question list, but what would you consider like be one of your like favorite foods? Like, oh man, I really want this for dinner.
I mean, like I said, pork steak.
Okay.
Pork steak is a real treat.
Okay.
There's also like basically, I mean, almost anything. If you can like put cream of mushroom soup on it, that slaps.
Okay.
So I mean, if you get like a vegetable, maybe if you get like I don't know, fish and some sort of like swai maybe and rice and like a vegetable or something, and put cream of mushroom soup on it, that's great. But I mean, that's so much effort. I mean, that's almost getting past the point of being white food.
So you're saying white food is low effort, but edible.
I'm just being, you know, I don't know, rude to my own culture.
Okay, that's fine. Are you a fan of reading, like books and such?
I mean, I used to read a lot.
Okay.
Honestly, like when I was younger, I was like, so we had some sort of like reading, blah blah. I don't remember what it's called, but it's like AR reading program or whatever.
Yep. Advanced
I would read,
reading.
like, I would read like constantly.
Nice.
Like, I mean, I would read like a few grade levels higher than I am
Mhm.
now or whatever. But basically, I don't read anything anymore except for like Twitch chat. Reddit, Twitch chat, sometimes Google or some sort of web page for like technical documents.
More like information getting, reading than anything else.
Yeah, I like read web pages. Now, I do listen to audiobooks at times.
Okay.
More so, I will end up doing podcasts, which is definitely not reading.
Fair.
Audiobooks is closer to reading, but I don't do that very often either. Because you have to go out of your way to like specifically get the audiobook, etc., etc.
I guess.
I mean, if I read faster,
Mhm.
I would probably read more. But I'm one of those people who reads like at the speed they talk.
Okay.
You know what I mean? So I was like the sort of person who like, it almost without fail, anytime I did read a book, I would find typos.
That's
I'd
fair.
be like, oh, there's a clear typo here.
Yeah.
Because I would actually read what was there.
Yeah.
Like, people would ask me to proofread for them because all I would have to do is just read it once and I would notice all of the mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
In like, you know, oh, you had a typo here or whatever. Oh, I mean, this is actually a word, so your thing didn't catch it, but it's not the word you meant.
Yeah.
Because you know, I'm slow at reading, so I'm reading it precisely.
Yeah.
If you know what
Slow
I mean.
and steady.
Yeah. It's so I mean, yeah, so like back in like college days, you know, they'd give it like a reading assignment, and the reading would take me like so long, and it'd be like, why is this so long? But you know, I would retain it.
It's good though. But reading retention is very important, and it doesn't really make a difference.
I only read it once.
Yeah,
I read it once. It
you
takes
memorize
ages, but at least I remember it.
Yeah, slow and steady.
Whereas-
You retain. What's the word for it? You basically retain all the information. That's the word.
But you know, it's bad. I'll tell you this. There was one class in particular where I was just like, the reading takes too long. Too long. I hate how long this reading takes. So I decided as an experiment to try not doing any of the reading assignments.
Oh.
And instead I would just scan the book to try to get the answers to whatever I was asked. Didn't affect my grade at all.
Nice. So you can still retain a good amount of information just from skimming.
Dude, I mean, not necessarily. But I would also pay attention to the lecture, and that was enough.
Oh,
I
yeah.
didn't need to read the book.
I never paid attention to lectures. I was a terrible student.
Well, I mean, maybe I didn't pay attention to either, because like I was in Spanish class, for example.
Yeah.
And so early Spanish class, like the pace was just way too slow. So like I would just constantly like be writing notes or like letters to other people during the entire class.
Nice. Were you writing them in Spanish at least?
No, I was writing in English.
Wow.
But I like, this was back in high school.
Yeah.
But like I had a rule for myself where I was just like, okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just be writing here, and every time the teacher asks a question, I'll just count to 10.
Mm-hmm.
And if no one has been called on, I'll raise my hand and answer.
Okay.
That's what I did. And I did it so I didn't get called on too often. But, you know, I was participating. And I remember there was one day where I was like, you know what? As an experiment, I'm going to try not writing notes or whatever. And I'm just going to pay full attention to class. And I fell asleep.
Yes. Fair. I was a constant sleeper in my class. Or basically, if I tried to, like, pay attention and only pay attention, I would just zone out.
If you don't want me to be distracted, I'm going to fall asleep perhaps.
That's why I'm constantly trying to, like, whenever I'm like actually learning something or like watching stuff, I usually am doing something else now. I need something else to kind of fiddle with.
Well, I mean, I'm the sort of person who, if I'm like having a face-to-face conversation with somebody, I'm probably not looking at them.
That's fair. I'm not looking at you right now.
Yeah, I'm not looking at you either.
But it looks like there's a couple people who are also talking about Morgie thinks that they're a slow reader as well because they don't read as much, and it makes them sleepy.
No, it says technically she's not a slow reader, though.
Oh.
She's probably comparing herself to like some sort of metric that says she's not actually
Yeah,
slow.
the internet
In her own
one.
view, she's slow.
Yeah. And Andrea says, sometimes skip pages when I don't like a book, but I'm too far into it to stop reading. Yeah, I mean, I guess if it's like trying to finish the book.
Like, I will say this for myself. Like, I'm a slow reader, and I know that I'm a slow reader.
Uh-huh.
But I can because I only read at like the speed in which I talk. But I've known from experience, I've gone through like online trainings and I've found ways that I could speed it up to like 3 times speed,
Mm-hmm.
and I could still understand it fine. So, I mean,
If you get the information, that's fine.
I would much rather listen to like a sped up audio
Yeah.
than to read it
Oh,
myself.
I've done that as well. Or I'll listen to an audiobook or a podcast and I'll increase the speed. But speaking of audiobooks, what was the last one that you remember listening to?
I don't remember what the last audiobook I listened to, but I did listen recently to a series called it was the Story Thieves, I think.
The Story Thieves.
Yeah, by James Riley. He's
Okay.
got a series. I thought it was pretty good. It's about like, well, I'll just read some of this. Basically, there's this guy who like finds out his neighbor can like, or a friend of his can like go into books
Okay.
and stuff.
Pretty
and
fun
they
ability.
End up getting into some. They end up getting into some real shenanigans. That's
I
what
knew you
I'll
were going to say shenanigans.
well, I mean, I don't want to spoil it. But
Yeah, I know what you
recommend
mean. Yeah,
that
shenanigans.
series.
I get that.
Yeah, one thing that I will say as an audiobook experience,
Mm-hmm.
the 4th book in the series is kind of abysmal because it is a pick the plot / choose your own adventure,
Oh, wow.
which is hard to do
Yeah,
as an audiobook.
I would imagine so. If you'd like to take this decision, press 1. If you'd like to take this decision, press 2.
No, it's more like if you blah blah blah, skip to chapter 23.
Oh, that just sounds even worse. Like auto, you have to like go in and like, okay, skip to like 34 minutes in or something.
Yeah, it's very interactive.
Okay.
Word.
I mean, it'd probably be fine if it was a game, but as an audiobook, that's not what I would be expecting.
Yeah.
I
It was strange that it was made into audiobook, but it was.
Yeah, I mean, you gotta respect them trying, I guess. I usually read over have audiobooks. I'll listen to audiobooks, but I'll also like speed up a bit. I have a problem with
I got
reading.
kicked out of the game.
Yeah, I saw. I switched to just chatting a while ago.
Yeah, I'm just chatting.
Yeah.
True.
But yeah, similar to what people talk about too. And like for reading, like I'll get really into the book and then I'll just keep reading, and it's very dangerous because like there's definitely been a time where I just spent the entire day reading. I'm like, I probably should eat something, huh?
Yeah, so I would say I used to read a lot more, but it's been replaced by the fact that there's such easy access to like video content and or even like games you can just play.
Yeah.
So I saw some Morgie talking about trying to read in bed and suddenly it's morning. I remember, like, for example, I fell asleep so much playing like Final Fantasy Tactics Advance.
I really love Final Fantasy Tactics Advance, so I understand that.
I understand that is on your list of games and you're familiar with it. I'm just saying I fell asleep playing it a lot.
Yeah. Like, you would fall asleep mid-battle, or it'd be like, okay, I'm going to finish this, then fall asleep?
Yeah, I'd be in a battle and I'd just fall asleep.
Nice.
Like, I don't know, maybe I was grinding experience.
Yep, fair. And then Squirrel says, I thought about reading an adventure book like that on stream, but that would require me streaming regularly and having half a decent amount of viewers. You don't need to have a half decent amount of viewers. Just, stream what you want to do. The only way you get more viewers sometimes is just to stream and see who gets interested, right?
Yeah, as long as you got like a set schedule, and then if you're not, don't be too worried about having chat interaction all the time. I mean, even if you have viewers, they might not be active. It's pretty common that you'll have, even if you got like say 12 viewers, maybe you only have like 3 active chatters or something.
Oh, Squirrel's talking about having the viewers make the decisions.
Yeah, I knew that's what Squirrel meant.
I misread that. My bad. I would say just give it a chance, and then you can't beat yourself up about just like one try. But yeah, fair. Let's see. Next question for you. If you could pick a skill set to learn, what would it be?
I'm trying to think of like a reasonable answer.
Okay.
Because like the first thing that popped to mind was knife throwing.
Knife throwing's pretty cool.
But like that's not actually practical.
I mean, it could be. You never know when you might need to be able to throw a knife.
Yeah, I mean, true. Very true.
Oh, more
Yeah,
guys.
I mean, I have done some tomahawk throwing in the past.
Okay.
Just referring to what Morgie said.
Mm-hmm.
Like, yeah, I mean, there's definitely a certain way in which you can throw it that it has a good. It's pretty easy to control the like left-right movement if you
Mhm.
just do a good overhead toss. But anyway, skill I would actually want. I don't know. I mean, the thing is that I feel like if there's any real question, any
Mm-hmm.
real answer to this, it's like, well, why aren't you just learning that skill then?
I mean,
Um,
to be fair, it didn't
well,
specify
yeah.
a practical skill either. Knife throwing is totally valid.
I mean, if we're talking about like a skill that it would just be nice to have, but I don't have to actually try at
Yeah.
all to attain it,
Mm-hmm.
then probably something to do with automobiles.
Okay, like
Because
car
it'd
workmanship,
just be nice.
mechanic.
It'd just be nice to be able to fix my own stuff, you know? Because right now, that's one of the categories of things. So a lot of trades, I would just be like, you know what? I could maybe figure this out,
Mm-hmm.
but I feel like the risk of doing it wrong is high enough that I would rather pay someone.
Yep, no, that's fair.
I mean, like I can't think of a reason right off the top of my head,
Mhm.
realistically, why I would hire anyone to throw knives for me.
I mean, maybe you need to hire someone to like, as like a bodyguard, and they're like, the best bodyguard in the area that throws knives.
Yeah, I mean, it's plausible, but it's not very plausible.
No, but just suspension of disbelief, if anything.
I mean, I don't know. I think what
For a
would be
birthday
nice,
party.
and I'm not willing to really work on it, but I wish that like I was like more than mediocre at like any sort of drawing.
Oh, that's completely fair and valid. I wish I was good at drawing.
I understand that the people who are good at it
Uh-huh.
have probably put a lot of hours
Mhm,
into it,
mhm.
and that's why they're able to do something decent pretty quickly.
Yeah.
But I just want to be able to skip to doing something decent fairly quickly.
I mean, that's
So,
very. I think a lot of people have that mindset.
yeah. But I'm generally at like the stick figure level.
I mean, stick figures are fun still too.
Sometimes my stick figures, they don't even look like, you can't tell what they are.
Think you can't even tell they're stick figures?
Like maybe I could try doing that like tulip cat thing, but it'd probably turn out looking like a raccoon. I don't know.
I mean, hey, at least then you know how to draw a raccoon, right?
Yeah, but I'm not being serious about it either. I'm just gonna not try.
I mean, that's also an answer. You don't have to try. Depends what you want out of things, and then risk versus reward, or however much effort you want to spend for whatever you want.
Yeah.
I've tried to learn how to draw. I'm not great at it.
I'm a little bit disappointed that we were here. We got through it in like 88 minutes. So
We're just really good at the game. It's that communication we got.
ridiculous.
Yeah, we also ask questions while playing, so it's even better.
And I wasted time describing things that I was pretty certain didn't matter.
See, maybe that's it.
In
You
great
built
detail.
a solid foundation from the get-go of describing things. And that really helped us out.
I thought that was pretty funny how
It
I was
was.
describing the archways and stuff.
It was extremely over the top, and you were committing to the bit.
Yep.
All right. What's your favorite holiday?
What is my favorite holiday? Okay, I need to look up a list of holidays.
Today is Earth Day.
Oh, yeah, okay. I mean, I'm just not I don't know. I don't really celebrate holidays in general.
No, that's fair.
Like I mean, maybe I used to, because I mean, okay, so like Christmas would be good, but I dislike the pressure.
Mm,
You know what I
yep.
mean?
Yep.
I mean, Thanksgiving you have pressure also. So I mean, I prefer my holidays to be pressure free.
Okay.
So I mean, let's see, probably
What about like St. Patrick's Day?
wait. Okay. I mean, I don't know. There's not really a pressure there, but
Yeah.
um, maybe Memorial Day
Okay.
because it's always on a Monday and you pretty much always get it off of work.
Fair enough.
So it's convenient because it's always on Monday.
Yeah.
Same goes for like Labor Day, I guess. 'Cause
Mhm.
it's always on Monday. So you get the day off of work and you don't necessarily have to do anything. So it's a good holiday.
Yeah. It's you want it for more the ability to like relax in a sense, like less stress.
Yeah. I mean, if you have to like work on the holiday or do something crazy, like I mean, I don't know. I've had some really bad Christmases.
No, that's fair and understandable.
Bec- because of like miscommunication and
Mhm.
like, you upset somebody and then they like say things to you that are kind of mean. So
Yeah.
it's lame.
Oh, well, I'm sorry to hear that. I hope your next Christmases go super well. And Morgie says it's Lesbian Awareness Week, so keep your guard up. I don't know how to take that, but fair. I'm aware of you, Morgie.
That's why I replied with the attack.
Yeah. No, I got that. All right, let's see what the next question is. And you can always ask me questions too. But what's your favorite color?
My favorite color. I always used to say green.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess we'll go with that.
Solid.
But I don't know, maybe the blue color of your background.
Like a teal or cyan?
Yeah, like I'm currently sucking up to you.
I wouldn't notice.
Yeah, it's whatever color you're using as your background.
Okay, whatever color I like. Understood.
Yeah.
That's fair. What's your favorite sushi?
What is my favorite color? Probably something really bland.
Okay.
And okay, so I don't really. Sushi is not something that I have traditionally liked. Usually it's like wrapped in like nori or seafood or something like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
That is absolutely vile. The seafood.
Mm.
And lots of times there'll be like some sort of like tones of like vinegar or something vinegary, and vinegar I can't, is unpalatable to me.
Yeah.
So I mean, I don't have a favorite sushi.
That's fair. No, I mean that's an acceptable answer. I do actually want to ask you something else that's related to the whole vinegar part.
Uh-oh.
This is a tangent from a previous question. So, speaking of hot sauces in general, a lot of them are vinegar based, and is one of the reasons why I'm not a huge fan of a lot of hot sauces. But there are some that don't have vinegar in it. Would you be interested in trying those, or are you still like, nah, I'm not a fan of hot sauce?
I mean, I don't really enjoy the feeling of the heat.
You don't like spicy.
But if the heat was at least not coupled with being also tasting bad, I'd be more willing to, to try that out. I remember when I was in high school, for some reason, like a friend of mine had like these jalapeno jelly beans.
Ooh.
Oh, I'm sorry, jalapeno.
Sure.
And for some reason, I was like, they were like, "Hey, have a mouthful of these." So of course I did, and that was fine.
Like, was it fine as in like it was alright to eat, or was it fine like, oh, I actually like the taste of this?
No, I mean it tasted okay, and it didn't really bother me. It was a bit heated, but whatever.
Okay.
We used to eat like these red hot, like fire, some sort of candy.
Yeah, like Red Hots.
Yeah, maybe it was Red Hot something.
I think I know you're talking about like the cinnamon tasting type of stuff.
Like I don't really mind it too much if it's hot, as long as it's not also bad tasting. And in general, I just don't like the taste of peppers.
Fair.
So.
Okay, that's actually another food question. Is the next question because it's random, right?
Okay.
What food smells the best to you? Is it pork steak?
I have a bad nose.
Okay. Like
that's what I will say. Like, I mean, I just don't smell things very well.
Oh.
Apparently.
Interesting.
Maybe that has Maybe that has something to do with the blandness of my my diet.
Maybe, yeah, because they say smell is really big on connected to taste.
Like I will say, for example, sometimes I will take like laundry that may have sat in like the washer or dryer for a while or whatever, and I'll take it out of the dryer and I will do a long inhale.
Yeah, a sniff
And then
test.
I will bring it. Yeah, and then I'll bring it to my wife and be like, "I'm not sure. Does this stink?"
Uh-huh.
And she'll be like, "Yes." And I'll be like, "Oh, I wasn't sure because it didn't stink to me."
Mm-hmm.
And you know that's just bad, I guess.
I mean, yeah, I guess in terms of like a survival-based thing, it is a lack of ability to find or detect poisonous or strong-smelling stuff. But yeah, fair. Has it been like your entire life that you haven't been able to smell super well, or do you think it's like something that's like happened over time?
I have absolutely no idea. I consider my wife to be a super smeller.
Okay, so it might be an unfair comparison.
Perhaps she isn't. Perhaps she isn't. But like there will be times where she will like be like extremely up in arms, upset about some sort of stench
Mm-hmm.
that she cannot drop. It needs to be taken care of, and can't. I'm not even noticing it.
Hmm.
So in my mind, I kind of feel like I'm being gaslit, but I know that it's real. You know what I mean?
I understand what you mean. You can't detect it, so you can't perceive it as much. So you have to
Like,
trust someone else saying things.
well, like sometimes it'll be like like literally there could be like I don't know, poop on the floor across the room.
Yeah.
I can't smell it. But
Ah.
I have to get within like a foot or two before I can even smell it at all. Like it has to be really
Yeah. Yeah.
strong or I just don't smell it. So I
Understood.
mean, we used to have problems with poop in the house quite a bit.
Yeah.
So. You
Understandable.
probably don't want me to go into details, but my son was big into the poop smearing.
Fair. And I can see why not having a sense of smell could be a good and a bad thing in that situation, or in the sense that you don't have to like
Yeah,
suffer from it, but you also have to find it.
it definitely gives me an advantage when it comes to dealing with
Yeah.
gross stuff.
Makes sense.
Because so what I've said in the past, I feel like what my mind does
Mm-hmm.
is it'll be like, I might walk into a room and there's a scent, and I smell the scent for 1 second,
Mm-hmm.
and then I stop smelling it.
So maybe it's like your mind tunes it out.
It just tunes it out like so quickly,
Yeah.
and I can't get it back.
You're adapting to that situation.
Unless I go like straight to the source.
Yeah, yeah. It's
It has
like
to be really strong.
yeah.
So I don't know.
That's fair.
It's just
I mean,
it's my brain problem.
there's the whole thing like getting nose blind to a scent. Like for instance, like if you're living in an area like for long enough, like you'll get used to the scent. So if something smells off, you can't tell unless you like reset your like nose palate, I guess you can say, or like such, and then you get nose blind to it. Like for instance, like sometimes when like I'll bake, it smells like that in the house, but I don't notice it because I get used to it. But until like I leave and then I come back, I was like, oh hey, it smells like cake in here now, and I didn't realize how strong it was because I got nose blind to it. Maybe it's the type of thing where like you just become nose blind like instantly. So yeah. And Morgie says, my mom thinks my ferrets are stinky, but to me they have no smell unless I literally sniff them. Fair. Might be nose blind again. Squirrel says, like when you visit someone's place and you smell their place, but they don't. Yeah, it's something you get used to. And it just seems like for you, Nasty, you just get used to it like instantaneously.
Yeah, basically. So just this is totally off the wall.
Okay.
So I just want to share with you a scripture from my cult.
Okay. Share away.
It feels slightly relevant.
Okay.
Therefore, if this is the case, I would that ye should go in and see my husband, for he has been laid upon his bed for the space of 2 days and 2 nights. And some say that he is not dead, but others say that he is dead, and that he stinketh, and that he ought to be placed in the sepulchre. But as for myself, to me he doth not stink.
Yeah, I would say that relates because it's a
Yeah, it's very
nose
relevant.
blind thing.
She
It's
couldn't smell him.
yeah. It's
Like,
also
he does not stink, man. He does not stink.
yeah, and she was there the entire time. And it's also like one of those things where it's like if you constantly see somebody, you don't really notice the changes that they go through each day. But if you don't see somebody for like a week, you'll notice like, oh hey, here's their hair's longer now, right? It just depends on how often you're like put yourself in that situation for it. But I got a next question for you. Do you drink coffee at all?
Not really.
Okay. I think you mentioned before you take.
haven't-
Yeah, go ahead.
I haven't acquired the taste for it, and I haven't made myself acquire the taste for it.
Fair enough.
It's I mean, I could probably drink it.
Eat it.
With like my wife will take it with like a whole bunch of sweeteners added,
Mhm.
and I get that. But like, I mean, I've tasted it black, but it's pretty vile, honestly. As someone who's never really drinking it,
Yeah.
but I could see the desire to want to acquire the taste for it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you could definitely acquire the taste for things. Like, I mean,
Yes.
I've done that to myself for like record albums too. Like, oh, I just played this over and over for no reason, and now it's like the best album ever, obviously.
Well, yeah, and I think there's a whole reason for that. If we're going on a tangent real quick about music, I believe that they theorize that the reason why people like music a lot is because it's a rhythm that they can kind of guess what happens next to it, right? And so when it happens, like I knew it was going on, like it's like a small dopamine hit in a way. But that's also why if you listen to a song constantly, you'll eventually understand it well enough that you'll like enjoy it more.
Yeah. See the nice boys dancing in pairs, golden earring, golden tan, blow waving their hair. Sure, they're all straight as a line. All the gays are macho, can't you see their leather shine?
Is this lyrics you memorized, or are you reading those?
I was reading that, but it's
Okay.
a song I listen to so much
Fair.
that it's insane.
Also, thank you for the follow, Mad Hatter. I appreciate you. Yeah, let's say
Joe Jackson, Real Men.
Ah, fair. Let's see. Morgie says maybe the problem is you're eating coffee grounds probably.
Yeah, I want to eat coffee grounds for sure.
Fair. I know people who used to like people who dip. People would do that, but with coffee grounds instead. Yeah. Have you listened to the new Taylor album? You said you've listened to like 2 songs so far, right? It took you like a whole day.
I've listened to about 1.5 songs in the album. I'm just not that interested.
That's completely valid.
I don't listen to music very often, or when I do listen to music, it'll usually just be like the old stomping grounds of like maybe weird songs I remember. Like, I'm actually thinking about listening to Chinatown.
Oh shoot,
Joe Jackson
it's Sigrin
now, because that song's ridiculous.
Yeah. One moment.
You got raided.
You got raided by Sigrin. Hello, welcome in, welcome in.
I was lurking in her stream.
Well, now you're looking at my stream again.
Since it started.
So. Oh dang!
Yeah,
so quick, Morgie.
Moon will surpass me.
Yeah, Moon is. I don't know.
I need to go to her stream and buy the emotes so I can do
Oh my god.
Oh, she's
raid
a
call.
sweetheart. Don't try.
She is.
Because that's very important.
I'm just gonna go for it, dude.
That was golf with your friends, right, Sigrid? Also, welcome in, Raiders. I'm Garbage Lord, and welcome to the second episode of Garbage Lord Has Friends, or GLHF. Today's friend is NastyTriangle. We'll probably be only go on for about like 20-ish more minutes, if that. If you're okay with that, Nasty.
I literally had no idea how long this would go. I'm slightly surprised it's still going.
I was gonna hold you hostage for about 3 hours.
You know what? I mean, if you wanted to go, I don't know, you could go a couple hours longer. I'd probably
a couple hours longer. I mean, I don't really have anything else going on right now. But if you guys want to ask questions, there's a pinned
my wife
thing.
was talking about maybe be making something, but
oh yeah,
maybe I will.
If you want, I mean, if you need to go, by all means. As I said, I have 70 questions to go through if I really wanted to. I can always make up more questions, Nasty. Believe me, I can talk. But yes, welcome in everybody. I'm Garbage Lord. Thank you for the raid, Sigrid. What were you playing?
She played a couple things.
Okay.
I don't know what.
Oh, Nasty did that.
Yeah.
That's all him.
Yeah, this is all me.
Yeah, 100% him.
we're using some sort of Discord like
Reactive.
visualization thing, and I found out you could put a GIF for one of your images, so that's what I did.
Yeah, and then to add more context, I was originally gonna have Savante, but he wasn't feeling great, so I was able to ask Nasty last minute to like sub in, and he came up with that like last minute as well. And I'm just like, I didn't see it until we started, or right before the stream started. And like, oh my god, that's impressive. But Sergin, what games do you play? If you don't mind me asking. And let me ask you a question while I'm waiting for an answer. Let's see, what's the next question to ask? If you could have lunch with anybody, alive or dead, who would it be and what would you eat?
Oh, were you asking me this? I'm sorry, I wasn't paying attention.
No, you're good. The question is, for you, if you could have lunch with anybody, alive or dead, who would it be and what would you eat?
I'm making a face because it's such a weird question.
It is. It's basically, who would you have a meal with if you could have a meal with anybody?
I mean, I don't know.
Okay, you can pass. You don't have to answer all these questions.
I'll just pass.
No worries.
I don't care.
Oh, okay. Squirrel says, "Dinosaur stay with Jeff Goldblum." That's fair. All right, Nasty. If you have a catchphrase, or if you had a catchphrase, what would it be?
Piece of peace. I don't know. I'm just saying that for fun.
Piece of peace.
Yeah, that no good piece of peace. Catchphrase. Not bazinga, because I was taken. I don't know. Maybe I already have a catchphrase.
I mean, Morgie, what do you think it is? Shenanigans? Nice. And it looks like Sergin was playing Citizen Sleeper, which is very RPG-like, a lot of text. And then Koromon as like a pixel art RPG Pokemon. Nice. Morgie asks why you don't want to have dinner with me. I can cook.
Fine.
Yeah. But, all right, next question.
It was lunch anyway, not dinner.
Truth. But sometimes people consider lunch to be dinner, and then dinner is actually supper.
That's true.
Like military side, they consider it dinner sometimes. It really depends on the place. All right, next question. What's the coolest mythological creature in your opinion?
I guess I'll go with the hippogriff.
Okay, hippogriff is good. It's definitely a more, what's the word? Not rare, but uncommon choice, I would say, right? Because that's the one that's
or I
like...
go with maybe a chimera.
Okay. Like, so like...
I don't...
Go ahead, sorry.
No, you go ahead.
I would say...
Chimera is good, obviously.
Yeah. I mean, chimera in general, I want to say, is specifically a, like, more of any kind of combination of creatures in general. But the traditional chimera people would think of in terms of fantasy side would be the lion head, ram head, and then the tail would be the snake.
I remember back in the day, this was still after I read. I mean, after I stopped reading. But I used to be signed up for the dictionary.com word of the day. And I it's kind of ridiculous. I remember I was writing some paper for the class and I actually used the word chimeric.
Okay.
Meaning, hoped for but illusory.
Oh.
Or impossible to achieve.
Fair. I've never used it in that term, but I can see why that would be a thing. I guess I kind of just see it as more of like, this combination of things.
But back in the day, I remember the meaning that had been listed to me was something around the lines of, capable of existing only in thought.
Okay. That makes sense.
Chimerical.
It looks like Sigrid says the confusion, and in Denmark they call lunch breakfast. Interesting. I generally have breakfast for lunch in the sense that I'm breaking fast at lunchtime. But next question. What's your favorite planet?
Earth.
Earth? That's my answer too, to be honest with you. It's pretty nice.
It's a cop-out.
It is a cop-out. But, it's fair. a valid one, right? Like, I haven't been to other planets.
Yeah, exactly.
If you could, though, if you had to go to another planet and you'd be able to live there, fine. What planet would it be?
I guess Pluto.
Pluto? Fair. Even though Pluto isn't a planet, it's a dwarf planet.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, to be fair, I would consider Pluto to be my favorite planet if it wasn't if it didn't lose its classification.
Maybe
yeah.
maybe Rise of 5 or something. I don't know.
Oh, all right. I wasn't even considering the planets outside of our solar system.
Right.
Sigrun says, I'm breaking fast at lunch, but I can still call the meal lunch. Yeah, that's fair. I respect that. All right. Nasty, if you could tell everybody in the world one thing, what would you say?
Hi.
Hi. Yeah, that's very nice answer. Andrea says Pluto's a planet.
Oh, wait, no. Follow Garbage Lord 1 on.
Thanks. I appreciate that. That means a lot to me.
We needed the new follower goal. The stream.
Yeah?
He needs that outlet for creativity.
You're not wrong. Sigrun asks, how many questions do I have prepared? I have 70 random questions, 10 regular streamer questions, 4 specific ones for Nasty that I haven't even gone into yet, and then 5 questions that haven't inputted from the little Google document. And then, of course, I'll ask other questions off the cuff as well that are related to what we're talking about.
But you did say we were ending soon.
We are. I was going to ask one more question before I get to the last section things. What game do you want to be better at?
Apparently Super Mario World.
I mean, is that based off what people tell you, or is that based off your own heart?
No, I mean, I would like to be better at it.
Okay. It's fair enough. You can get all the world records.
I mean, I've been grinding it, but I would like to be better.
Yeah.
Maybe Darktide.
I mean, you can always play more Darktide, and I'm happy to help. Help you learn.
But it's like drawing. Like I want to be better without much effort. Like I just want to be better.
Yeah.
Instead of working to get better.
I see. You want the improvement without the actual work for it.
Yeah, exactly.
All I can say is just be more talented.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. All right. So we're gonna reach the end of our stream here. I have like 5 more questions total, but it's part of the end stuff, right? So, what's your next scheduled stream / planned stream?
I mean, I'm probably gonna stream tomorrow.
Okay.
Apparently, I do that on Tuesdays usually.
Around what time?
I do. I don't know.
Okay.
I do need to look for work.
Fair. Valid. Okay, sometime tomorrow. For those of you interested in what's the word? Interested in watching, and also, Morgan, you should be able to do this too down the line. Let's see if it works. Yep. There's a link to his profile. Give him a follow. He's a swell guy. He's very entertaining. Has so much chat interaction redeemed. It's crazy. Okay, Nasty, next question. Are there any streamers you'd love to shout out?
Okay, let's go. Let's see. A Ninja and Shroud and no, I'm kidding. I don't know.
Just pick one.
Everybody who I like's already here.
Okay, fair. Everybody in chat. You're the favorite streamers. All right. Next question. Who are we rating?
I don't know.
You get to choose.
If you want me to choose,
I want you to choose.
If I'm gonna raid somebody who I know is on,
yeah,
that I would actually probably bother to hang out with,
yeah,
then it's gonna be Thanatis.
Okay.
He's already there.
I'm not surprised. You did mention that earlier. Okay. What's our raid call gonna be?
Let's see.
You can type in the chat too if you'd like.
Doesn't make any sense.
It's fine.
There you go.
I want to give me a wedgie. All right, cool. Everybody, that's the raid call.
I want you to give me a wedgie.
All right, sure. Fair enough. That's the raid call, everyone. Make sure you all do that. I'll do it too. We're raiding Thanatis. Thank you, Nasty, for the last minute scheduling. But we'll be rating Thanatis, who's playing
It's so stupid. It's so
Silent Breath. Yep. Yeah, sure, whatever. I don't care.
I thought about doing something in grandma related, but
I mean, you can if you really want to change it, you have about a minute.
Nah, whatever.
Then we're doing it.
Anyway,
Everyone has to say this.
I gotta go work on something for my wife. So
That's fair. Are you gonna stick around for the raid at least?
yeah, I mean, I gotta paste the. I want to give you. Want you to give me a wedgie?
Yeah. Okay. What's your last words for the stream?
I don't know, but you should probably do a little dance.
Sure. Last words to the stream. You should probably do a little dance. That's it, everybody. Thank you for everything. This has been another episode of Garbage Lord Has Friends.
I meant you.
Nope, that was your last words.
You had friends. You had friends.
I appreciate it. I'm rating. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Let's see if everyone actually says it.